everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, we have Josh Torres.
It's the final regular episode of this year.
Yeah. Mikhail Mednani.
Still playing 100 line.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
Xiaomin Wu.
How's it going?
Yeah, just thinking to myself, when we go into this next year, I'm going to try to change the opening because we kind of like settled on something, but it's kind of a mouthful. So thoughts to parse on for next year. But yep, Josh is right. This is our final regular episode of the Tetracast for 2025. Next week, we are going to be recording our Game of the Year cast. We'll probably be publishing that around the third week of December, trying to get it out before the holiday, which is a little bit of a schedule change for us because usually we don't put out our Game of the Year cast until the first week of January. So we're going to try to get it out a little earlier. It just aligns with other sites. It allows us to get to better prepare for January so we don't end up having a deluge of topics by the second or third week of January. So that's what we're going to try. Hopefully you will just see the Game of the Year cast published by Christmas.
I saw someone mentioning online that they actually kind of prefer that also because when they get to the new year, like after all the holidays and travel and whatnot, you kind of just want to feel like a new fresh start, versus like wait, here's the stuff that we were talking about last year, right? Like, no, it kind of makes sense. Just kind of get it out, a little sooner.
A request for our listeners though, before we get to the record the Game of the Year cast next weekend. If you're listening to it, this episode, relatively, close to before we record that, I want you people to, wherever you're listening to this, to put in the comments what RPGs you would like us to push for. What do you think is like? No, you guys should really, really push for this. This is what I really think is. It was awesome this year. I don't care how popular or how small or how many people know of it. Just no matter the scope, I want to hear from people what they enjoyed this year.
Also, vote in our poll.
I think you're going to skip.
Yeah, vote in our poll. I don't want to spoil anything, but we have two questions. Basically, what's your favorite game of 2025, RPG or RPG adjacent game? And what's your favorite what's your most anticipated game of 2026? And this year, both of those questions are really tight races, like literally less than 5 votes between first and second place.
Voted yet.
So vote. And like, I actually do appreciate when people tell me that I'm an idiot and I missed something. Like, some people are nicer than others, but one person actually told me, "Hey, you forgot the Monochromobius or that sequel that's coming out next year." And like, oh yeah, I guess I did forget that because it not technically confirmed for like a Western release, although it seems likely. So yeah, sure, I'll include that on the poll. Someone's really excited for it. So
yeah, another one that I saw that was like, hey, isn't that Trails of the Sky second chapter remake next year? It's like, oh yeah, they never officially announced it, but it's very easy to miss because it was like that was a teaser thing at the end.
And it's going to be announced on December 18th.
They did officially announce it in the most recent financials. They said that Trails in the Sky the second is coming. Well, in Japanese, the second chapter.
But it's easy to miss. It's easy to forget, and we appreciate when people like remind us, like, oh yeah, that's right, that's a thing too.
And then also just one other final programming. Well, I don't know if it's the final. Another programming note is that if it's not a game we've covered on our site, it's not going to be a game on the list or in contention. Like, we have never talked about. Well, I won't say never, but we have not covered Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding 2. I'm sure I'm missing some others like Doom: The Dark Ages. Like, those are not games we've covered, so they're not really going to be like on our lists in any real fashion. Doesn't mean our participants haven't played those. They might show up on personal lists, or we might have talked about them in passing in the podcast, but they've been not something covered by RPG Site as an entity. So just as a reminder, it's like, where's Ghost of Yotei? We've never covered that. We haven't reviewed it or anything, or whatever other game you're thinking we might be missing. I think that kind of covers the programming notes. So what that also means, well, I guess one other thing is our year is, in terms of coverage, is November to November. So we count December as part of the coverage for the next year. So what that means is, for instance, very specific, this podcast that we're recording now, that you're listening to now, we're going to be talking about, of course, Octopath Traveler 0. But now Octopath Traveler 0 is going to be a game that will be wrapped into 2026 in terms of coverage window, if that makes sense. So we're going to cover it now because we got a review up. We've had multiple people playing it. It's a topic du jour. But in terms of game of the year, it's not going to be in consideration for timing reasons, is effectively the truth.
And that also means that this year, for consideration, is Fairy Tail 2.
Oh
yeah.
Let's go. Let's go.
My point being games that came out last December. But I don't think there are any big hitters. There's Fantasia Neo Dimension, and we've talked about Fantasia a lot. So, but that'll probably be in the remaster category.
Definitely will, because it already got our RPG of the year in 2021.
So like we don't really need to give it more flowers, but it'll, it's not really new to us, but right. So
it was new to everyone that wasn't brainwormed enough to buy an Apple TV 4K to play that game, which was half this podcast.
Yep.
I played it on my iPhone with touch controls.
I played on my iPad.
I don't know what happened to that Apple TV thing I bought. I'm sure it's stuff somewhere. I only ever used it for Fantasia, and that's it. That was a great purchase. Yes, not one of the stupidest things I've ever done.
I'll probably buy it off you. We'll talk later.
Yeah, I still have that Apple TV 4K, and I'm gonna actually hook that up to my TV I'm getting like today, and it'll be like awesome. It will never know my Wi-Fi password.
Well, without further ado, then we're going to open up our main discussion here with the aforementioned Octopath Traveler 0. I know James has played it. I know Adam has played it. I know that Josh has picked it up. I'm a fair bit of the way through it, but we'll contextualize that in a moment. And we've had other people on staff who have also played it. So this is kind of like one of the big releases for our coverage in December. And to start out, I know like James and Adam are going to go back to back, and I'm sure Josh and I and others will chime in. But I'm gonna hand the microphone off to James first, because James was the one who was able to cover the review for us in terms of what actually got published onto rpgsite.net. And then I know that everyone's going to have their own opinion on this, and some of us have finished and some of us haven't. But without further ado, James, Octopath Traveler 0, an interesting game to talk about. You could talk about this you could come at it from many different directions. So good luck. Take us away.
How good can a game that in 2025 be that's under 5 gigs? How good can it be?
It's very good, except for the audio quality, which I thought was just me being me nitpicking, but apparently that has been like one of the major sticking points for people, is like, why is the audio so compressed? So shout outs to me, like actually giving a damn about audio quality.
Yeah, to be clear, like I think this is most prevalent on like the English audio track. I think the Japanese audio track seems to be, way less.
Not as bad,
yeah. But obviously, take the floor. Tell us about it. Very, very interesting release.
Yeah, so I think the best way to talk about Octopath Traveler 0, because like you said, there's many different ways to tackle this, almost like an Octopath game. But I think I kind of nailed it on the head with the last kind of takeaway from my review, where I said, I'll just read it directly. When taken on its own merits, Octopath Traveler 0 is the type of RPG you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else, and a fascinating case study in how, much like Final Fantasy prior, Octopath Traveler can reinvent its core elements while still maintaining an identity as a franchise. And the reason I chose that specific statement for the end of my review is, and we've talked about this internally as we were going through it, it's really fascinating how, despite the fact that 0 is very clearly still an Octopath game, it's about as far away from the original premise of the series as you can possibly be. Because Octopath 1 and 2, obviously, you have 8 different travelers. They have their own mostly separate stories that eventually come together, and that's more explicit in 2 than 1. Whereas Octopath Traveler 0 is more like something kind of like Chrono Cross in the way it's structured, it feels like, where there is a bunch of these different characters you can pick up, but the core story revolves around just a couple of handfuls of characters. And then eventually you build up a party, but it's just very different. Gameplay wise.
When you think about the inverse, you're mentioning, right? Because it's important to think about the roots of this. A lot of when they were first announcing this, there's definitely the origin of it was from that Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent mobile game. But when you're developing that kind of style for a mobile title, you can't. It'd be hard to structure that kind of game with like 8 different protagonists and then coming together into one, like the console mainline games. So, like, this being the inverse, as you said in your review, it's sort of like, think about it like a tree branches, like in the main lines being, hey, you have these 8 different branches coming into one. While this one is like you start at this base one, but it eventually branches out, and you almost have create your own adventure tree on what you want to pursue, and you're gonna get into like about how they do that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because while that is true to an extent, it's a very linear game because you have to like the way it's structured briefly is it kind of starts at one point, then it branches out into 3 separate paths. Once you've done all 3 of those paths, it converges again, then it branches out, then it converges one last time. And
Sounds like a short game.
it's very
Sorry.
long. I mentioned
Yeah.
it in my review, and I know that others have said the same thing because it's just kind of true. The game really doesn't come into its own until like 20 hours in. And one thing I was like reading up about Champions of the Continent before writing my review, and I didn't mention this in the article, but I did find out that apparently the Master of All storyline was the original story they wrote for the game. So the Masters of Fame, Wealth, and Power storylines were basically all written after the fact to kind of like build up to what is the core first arc of the game, which is interesting, but also makes a lot of sense because everyone I've spoken to, it's like, yeah, the story doesn't really get that good until Master of All. And I will say that I think you've actually mentioned this back when Champions of the Continent first dropped. I do think the Master of Fame storyline is pretty good for what it is. But the other 2 were just whatever, like early on. But yeah, it's crazy how you get a credit roll, not the credit roll, but a credit roll once you finish Master of All, like 40 to 50 hours in. And it's like, yeah, you're maybe at the halfway point.
Adam, I'd like to hear from you because you also did, you played this game very extensively and did a lot of the guides up on the site. You are, you've been a fan of the Octopath games, and you didn't really know much about this going in, aside from like, hey, you kind of know it's mobile game roots, but you really didn't know what to expect. So I'm interested to know what your angle on.
Yeah, so I've been seeing some people like wondering or maybe even making declarations on like, is it better than Octopath Traveler 2 or not? And I find that hard to say definitively because it is so different. So like Octopath 1 and 2 especially being like a refinement of 1, it's basically 8 short stories. And they do converge, but I think honestly it's the short stories are the meat of that game. And I like those stories. There's several of those stories I'm really fond of, but some people didn't like those. And Octopath Zero is not that. There are like arcs that maybe could be in a way kind of separated from the main plot, but really James mentioned it. You have a kind of a three-way branch, then they converge, and then they branch again, and then it converges again. And by the time you get into the second half of the game, like characters from 40 hours ago are still present, still participating in the story, and the story at that point has escalated 2 or 3 times by now. And so like it's like a linear long one story. It's like one whole story, which is very different from the other Octopath games, which are more like short stories. So if you weren't a fan of like that kind of like 8 separated story component of Octopath, still consider this one because this one's very different in that regard. It still has a lot of the same Octopath trappings, but it is definitely got its own flavor to that. Now, personally, and I agree with James, like some of those Master of Wealth, Master of Power storylines early on, I'm like, I'm not really feeling this. I do agree that Master of Fame is probably the best of the Master storylines, like the first 3. I'll tell you this. This is the sort of game where the story, the longer that you kind of like are steeped in it, the more it endears itself to you, or at least it did to me, and I know some others have shared like a similar sentiment. And actually, Harper J. McIntyre actually has a pretty good review up on Kotaku about like how charming the game is, even though this is the sort of game it's going to throw every trope in the book at you, in terms of just like it's not going to like betray your expectations necessarily. It's not going to, pull out the rug from under you. It's not going to trick you. It's not going to deceive you. You can probably see every twist coming, but it doesn't matter. And it's very endearing, very charming, and by the time like I got past the Master of All storyline, you hit that first credit sequence, and then you're into like the Bestower storyline. Like things have ramped up. You're now pretty familiar with the cast of characters who are important. And I think the part of the game that I kind of decided like, yep, I'm on board now, despite the blemishes, despite the kind of the leftover construction of a mobile game, the part that I knew that I was on board, and I won't really spoil this directly, but it's the final battle of the Bestower of Wealth storyline, which is that's like the third arc of the game, really. And so like you're playing the final battle of this arc. So this is 60 hours into the game or whatever, and you're doing this boss battle. And Octopath boss battles are a highlight of the series, right? They kind of always have been. And the boss battle music is playing, and the music during this boss battle is Daughter of the Dark God. Music in Octopath games are excellent. Yasunori Nishiki is an amazing composer, and he's pretty much only done Octopath as far as video games go, I believe, but he's done an amazing job. And even though a lot of these tracks are kind of recycled from past games, there are some new ones also. They're still all excellent. Anyways, it's playing Daughter of the Dark God, which, if you remember, this is the track that played in Octopath Traveler 1 in the final phase of the final boss fight against Caldera. So this is a serious boss that you're fighting against, and you're fighting against it, challenging boss. You get him down to the last bit of his health, and then he wipes out your party. And then Bargello jumps in, who is a character that you meet early on in the game, and he says something along the lines of, "You never dared to believe in the bonds we humans share. For the family." And I'm like, hell yeah, for the family. And then the music changes to it's like Battle at Journey's End, which is the Octopath Traveler 1 boss music at the end of any of the 8 storylines, like that boss music. And that's one of my favorite RPG tropes, is when the boss music changes in a moment of triumph. And then you basically have like a victory lap against the boss as Bargello and his family kind of reunites to basically bolster you in that moment. And that's basically when I decided yep, I'm on board. This is really charming, really corny, but I'm in it. So it's one of those games. I guess what I'm trying to say is stick with it and it might grow on you.
This is also why I was really interested and excited that they chose Octopath Traveler to the continent to adapt into this kind of stripping it from its live service roots into constructed in a more traditional single player RPG that actually has a bespoke beginning and end, because you guys have the benefit now of getting to see this whole entire story without having to wait weeks, months, potentially years for the next main story update that those live service ongoing games have to go through, where you'll start the game and you'll get through a certain amount of content and say you have to wait for the next update of the main storyline to experience the next part, and it ruins the pacing on that, because it might end off on a really interesting note, and then they hook you with that interest to keep you still playing the game, participating in its events and all this just very minor content updates to keep people doing something until the next thing. Now you're just hey, I can immediately dive into the next story because I'm so hooked now. I don't have to wait for that. It's just a normal game now in that respect.
Yeah, it's an interesting case study on taking a mobile game with years of content and kind of condensing it as what they can into a packaged game. And that's why it's so long, is we have four basically parts of the story here, and you can play it, or I played it and James played it, within a couple of weeks. But if you were playing this on the mobile version, this would have been years of content that you would have stretched out over time. And so obviously Square Enix has several other mobile games that that have, almost past tense, that were under their belt, and like what can they do with those? This is a blueprint, or at least a case study, a try at it. It's interesting.
Yeah, I really hope they decide to do more of those kinds of projects. Let's say like with Near Reincarnation or the City Opera Omnia. I would love to see those, and get a similar treatment. But it also makes me wonder, like even outside the scope of Square Enix, things like Mega Man X Dive Offline, for example. Like Capcom has tried it with that, and that was a pretty cool game. Of like, hey, you have like just a shitload of like things, lots of stages, lots of like different characters to unlock. It was just like a really cool package of like making that once a mobile game into like now its own separate game altogether that you can kind of progress at your own pace, without any like gotcha monetization incentives tied to it. And I think about really long running games. I'm thinking about like Grand Blue Fantasy, Fate Grand Order, Another Eden. Games that have been running for literal years with really long single player campaigns. And one day inevitably those games will shut down.
Did you mention Opera Omnia?
Yes,
Okay,
I did.
sorry, I was wondering if you mentioned that or if I just made that up. But yeah, that seems like one that people, that as well as Near Reincarnation.
Yeah.
What was that Star Ocean game, or is it the
Anamnesis?
That's more Triace,
Uh,
isn't it?
That's Square, but it was under Square Enix as well. Triace and Square Enix.
Square Enix does own the Star Ocean, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that would be an interesting one to adapt to if you were to make its own game, because that did have actually like story arcs to it when it was running. So like I am all for like, hey, we may not agree or see eye to eye with how these games were initially released and how they were monetized in this like framework because of how the mobile game industry has evolved over time. But I am always all for like being able to preserve these games and having ways to like experience them even after they go end of life. In some way, shape, or form, people still deserve to, you know, have the like have a way to access them and play them for themselves, in some way, shape, or form, just to see what they were like.
And also, by the way, like this game, it doesn't cover all the arcs from the mobile game because the mobile game's still ongoing, right?
Yeah, it's
So
still
they were-
ongoing. Yeah,
I know I've seen content in the mobile game that has like the Octopath Traveler 2 characters. That's not here at all. So that must be stuff that
Yeah.
happened after Bestower of All, which is kind of the final
Mhm.
arc in this game.
Yeah, I will say that I've seen some people complain that content's not in this, but I'll be real, the actual content that ties into Octopath Traveler 1, like the protagonist from 1, is bar none the least interesting content in this game. So I kind of wish they weren't even here, so the game was just its own thing. But
Yeah, it's weird. Like they sometimes frame this as like this is the canonical prequel, and it doesn't really even make sense as a prequel. The Octopath Traveler 1 characters are recruitable in this game, but really you can just treat them like any other character. Funny enough, make sure you take this talking about gameplay now. Make sure you take Ulbrich's surpassing power mastery off of him, or clone it, how the game works. We'll talk about this in a second. That's a very, very useful mastery that he comes with. Allows you to break the damage limit. Thank you, Ulbrich.
Love
We should talk.
Ulbrich.
We should talk about
Love
how
that guy.
masteries work.
Yeah, go for it.
Should I, or should James?
you do it since you're the one that did the guides on it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we talked about the story structure, and just to be clear, if this hadn't come across, basically the 4 arcs are Master of Wealth, Fame, and Power, Master of All, Bestower of Wealth, Fame, and Power, Bestower of All. So like when we say these things, that's what they mean. It's like those 4 arcs in sequence. Anyways, so a lot of the combat stuff has also been tweaked in this game. There's a couple of big differences. I'll get to the masteries in a second. But a major difference in the game is that you have 8 people participating in a party in battle all at once. There are actually more than 30 characters to recruit in the game, and kind of what James was saying with like Chrono Cross earlier is that you get a lot of characters to use, but you don't necessarily have to use all of them, and you can kind of pick and choose which ones you want. And not all of these characters are like important to the story. Some are, but you have 8 slots to work with, frontline and backline. Now, only the characters in the front line can act. and only the characters in the front line can get hit from enemies. For most attacks, there might be some attacks that attack the back line, but for most attacks, only your front line is vulnerable. And so there's sort of this pairing that you do, and there are some like passive abilities that take into account like who they are paired with. Like for example, I think there's a passive where if a character is paired with another character, like the paired character has a 25% chance of gaining an extra BP or whatever. So there's some like kind of like slot coordination in that sense, where like you want this person paired with this person, you want this person to start in the back row, and then you want them to jump in the front row. So there's more of a positioning element that wasn't really there in any other Octopath game. That's kind of an interesting wrinkle. Another thing is that most characters, except the main character, just have the one job. They just have their one set of abilities. So there's no like, there's a little bit less like, character building in this game in terms of like setting up like one character with like two different classes, although there are the masteries. But still, I think this battle system, again, I hesitate to say that it's better, but I still really, really like it. It's different from the other Octopath games, and I was shuffling in characters in and out pretty readily throughout my game, depending on what their abilities were. Ultimately, by the time I got to the end of the game, it was their ultimate ability that was kind of like, if they had a good ultimate ability, then that's what like was the make or break if they like made the cut to be in my party or not. Like for example, I was using Viator throughout my game, and then I realized, Viator, your ultimate ability just kind of sucks. I mean, it comes up and it just doesn't do much. So I'm gonna get rid of you and replace you with someone else. But anyways, real quick, masteries. So basically, where this game does have like party configuration or like your party setup, is you throughout the game in a lot of different methods you gain masteries, which is basically like an equipable skill. It can be an active skill, like a skill that you can actually like click in battle to do an attack, or a passive skill with some sort of passive bonus. You get a bunch of these, like more than several hundred of these, and each character has 3 active slots and 2 passive slots that you can equip to. And besides like their weapon type, like for example, Viator can use swords and spears, so he can only equip sword and spear type abilities. But otherwise, you can equip any passive and you can equip any ability to any character. So there's a lot of flexibility there. For example, I had a character who was one of my Macy, who is an apothecary, and I gave them the ability to like do like a bunch of debuffs. So they would be healing when they could, but also when no one needed healing, I equipped them with a bunch of debuff abilities, which debuffs are super important in Octopath, and that became like one of their main functions, just because I decided that's what I want it to be. So there's a lot of like flexibility in how you play the game like that, and I'm actually been watching Brian play through Octopath, and he's using like different characters than I did, and kind of like approaching battles a little differently, and that's cool, right? You don't just use like the strongest character or the best one or whatever, right? You just kind of pick who you like, build them how you want. And the game is flexible enough and also easy enough. It's not that difficult to work with it.
And luckily, even though you say the game's not that difficult and it is linear, it is open enough in the sense where there's story gates in terms of and I'm saying this as someone who's about 5 chapters into the Master of All, so I think I'm at like what, the 40% mark, 35% mark or so, where you can the world map allows you to go, and it's very similar to the Octopath 1 and 2, where it's like node based, and every region has like a declared level, and it says like this is the average strength of the enemies here. Even if your next story quest is in a certain town and it says this story is recommended level 10, you can go into a field that says this area is recommended level 15. And then if you're strong enough to get through that, you can go to the next area, which is recommended level 18. And you can kind of like go off the beaten path a fair bit if you want to. So A, if you want it to be more challenging, you can in that sense. Or B, if you want it to be less challenging, but you like grinding, you can also exploit that to like get EXP from higher level enemies and then go back to the lower level story and do that. And I've been trying to not go too far in either direction. Like I'll kind of wander around areas that make like logical sense, but not ignore the story forever. So because I don't want to go back and have it absolutely be like meaningless in terms of challenge.
Yeah,
So
I
it's kind of like one of
started
those things
doing
where you can almost
this.
set your own difficulty. But
Yeah. So like James was reviewing and I was doing guides and I was just kind of curious, like early on, where can I go like right now? And from the start of the game, you can like, if you want, you start at the top of the continent and you can like work your way down to the southern part of the continent, which is like level 20, 30 areas. Um, from the get-go, and you can kind of like stair step your way up to like level 20, 30 levels before you even like start the story. I don't really recommend doing that. I was just seeing if it was possible, and it is. But yeah, like you said, the game is open-ended enough where if you want to just like go to high level areas early on, you can. The story is going to feel weird at that point because you're going to be fighting like level 6 bosses when you're level 25 or whatever, but it allows you to do that. But yeah, there are still the boss fights are still pretty fun, or quite fun, really. I think one of the highlights of the game are the boss fights. I don't think the game is as challenging as the other Octopaths, not necessarily as a bad or good thing, just maybe I'm used to it. Maybe it's just a little bit more flexible, that it allows you more wiggle room to when you're approaching these guys. But overall, I think like mechanically, it's not just Octopath 2 again. It's different. I know a lot of this stuff obviously is carried from the mobile game, and I know Josh has even talked about this like years ago, how the combat mechanics worked. And I think it's just kind of an interesting like kind of remix of the structure and the style of the combat. And it's that's why I think even if you're not a big fan of Octopath, it's worth giving this a shot because it does kind of remix things up a bit that might be more in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I've definitely been seeing, and I'm not surprised by this. When I was playing through the game, I kind of knew that there was going to be some people that ended up feeling this way. I've absolutely seen some people say, "Oh, this is the first Octopath that's really like hooked me," or "This is my favorite Octopath," and it's like, it's not my favorite. I still prefer 2, but I can completely understand why some other folks would have that takeaway. So
Yeah, it's that's why even oddly enough, I still remember my reaction to when Octopath 2 was announced. At them, like when they showed off it not having the front row and back row battle system from Champions of the Con, I was like, I really wish they did that because I really like that battle system. And it's finally cool to see. It's like, hey, this is why I kind of like that battle system more. Not to say it's like superior or whatever, but it's like I kind of like that flavor of it because there's more tinkering you can do in that battle system from my perspective. Because it's like I kind of like that management of like having those rows of characters. But that's just
Yeah,
I don't
me.
know, that's
yeah, I
kind of
would
reminding me
like,
of Xenoblade 2, where
I
I hated the battle system
I
until the
would,
DLC.
yeah, I would actually be pretty interested in if Octopath 3 has the full like front row, back row system, which I wouldn't be shocked if they end up going for that because I'm assuming we're going to get an Octopath 3. Obviously, it's just an assumption, but it feels pretty clear that this release was meant to kind of like keep the franchise in people's mind share, if that makes sense. Which
Mhm.
sounds like,
And then after Octopath 3, we'll have Octopath 2, which is like
There we
the
go.
rest of the Champions of the Continent stuff.
Yeah, after they've EOS us champions of the continent for sure this time, they'll get the
and
rest of the story.
and they'll have to do fresh translations for everything because, oh, buddy.
So that was a funny thing, right? Because like obviously one of the main things not present in this game is the collaboration stuff that they did with Champions of the Continent. Like they had Near Automata stuff, Live Alive stuff, and certain other properties in it. And I was like,
FF4.
FF4, yeah. I was looking, I was like, what, like my friends and I were talking about it, and I searched up, like, Googled the Live Alive stuff that came to Champions of the Continent. And like one of the first results of that is like a Reddit thread of someone complaining that they replaced like all like when the transfership of the English version of Champions of the Continent went to NetEase. Apparently, they replaced all the English script of the Live Alive content with like machine translated lines when it went over to NetEase. I'm like, that fucking sucks, man. And we've talked about it here on the podcast
Yeah.
when they transferred ownership of that mobile game to NetEase, like the global version. Like a lot of the English script was machine translated, and also it was almost the player base became QA testers because there was like certain dialogue boxes in the game that said, "Hey, if you notice any like errors or stuff you'd like to improve with the script, let us know," and then they'll like reward you with gacha currency if they accept like your your inquiry, basically, inquiry for it. I was just like, it's heinous shit.
Yeah,
Um,
it's. I think the thing I said at the time, and the thing I've said most recently. Well, at the time when Octopath Traveler 0 was announced, I was like, man, that's kind of scummy that Square Enix sold the service rights to NetEase when they absolutely knew that this was in development. Did NetEase know about this? And then the very next thing I said is, well, honestly, I don't feel too bad for NetEase. They can go fuck themselves for using machine translation.
yeah. So yeah, hopefully they do revisit this and do eventually get like we do like an Octopath 0 2 for the rest of like that story content that's like in later arcs of the Champions of the Continent. If not to just like give a second life to like, hey, this story deserves better in terms of like its English localization. English, I'm sure other languages may have suffered like similar shit, like in terms of like bad localization quality. Like this deserves like professional translators and localization editors and stuff like that to like bring the best out of like this script to the world. This n- nothing, like I said, nothing deserves like translated quality for your audiences, no matter what like excuse you'll find or what cost saving measure you'll reason you'll muster up. It's like, no, all these stories have merit. They all deserve the very best to bring out their full potential to their audiences worldwide. No matter the excuse that you have to bring them over machine translated. I don't care. That doesn't hold any water for me.
I have a couple of things I want to say. There's still a few things we haven't
Yeah.
touched on. One,
Sure.
I know we talked about that. There's still more Champions of the Continent content after this, but don't get it wrong. The finale of this game feels final. Like it's actually, I was actually surprised by the time I got to like the very end of this game. Again, like 100. It was actually more than 100 hours for me because I was doing a bunch of guide stuff, so I was going slow. But it is a long game. But like I was kind of surprised at like how much this game does escalate by the end. If you're the type of person who loves like stories that just or like the stakes just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, this is that sort of story. But like by the time you get to the end of the game, it really feels like this is the final battle. Like this is all or nothing, like right here, right now. So like it's a pretty conclusive ending. Now, of course, they can still keep going after that, which they do in Champions of the Continent. But don't get it wrong, it doesn't feel like it's unfinished or anything like that. So I wanted to say that. Another thing I wanted to say was I kind of touched on this earlier. In the other Octopath games, like your stories kind of revolve around like the each of the 8 different travelers, and it's kind of like their personal story, right? This game is a little different in that you create a character who is kind of like a silent self-insert sort of protagonist, and they are basically you start out in the town of Wishvale, and this is all new. To Octopath 0 and not in Champions of the Continent. And this is where you can kind of see maybe some of the seams between where they like new content versus, leftover content from the mobile game or however you want to phrase it. I'll get back to that in a second. But one thing about the storytelling in this game is a lot of times your like party characters, at least for the first half of the game, uh, it actually made me think of Dragon Quest VII a little bit just because I was just playing that. In that your party characters are actually more like observing the story. Like the main story characters, you meet Bargello or Bargello, however you pronounce his name, early on in the Master of Wealth storyline. He sticks around throughout the whole game. He's an important character. You meet Rinyu and Velnort in the Master of Power storyline, and you meet like Cezantos and other characters in like the Master of Fame storyline. And like these are like these characters that you follow become like characters that are like really the protagonists of the game. Some of them do eventually join your party, some of them very late, but it's got a different sort of storytelling in that you're basically revolving around these other kind of, they're almost like NPCs for a while compared to your playable party. So I wanted to mention that because it's got a little bit of a different feel, but I actually kind of liked it. I mean, I did like it. But yeah, Wishvale. So this is the new content in Octopath Zero. You are creating a town. This is the premise. This isn't a spoiler. Your town gets burned in like the first hour of the game. And then one of the things that you basically do on the start of your journey is you want to rebuild your town, and then kind of interspersed throughout all of these master and bestower storylines that we talked about are these storylines called Kindlers of the Flame, which this is the new content. And this is where you're basically finding like the refugees from your burned town, and basically recruiting them back to the town, putting the town back together, getting new facilities, and this is also how you can get money, equipment, consumable items, and other stuff to build your town. How do I put this? I did exploit these mechanics when I could to like get money. Especially, it's a really good way to make money in the game, so you can basically afford whatever you want. The town building stuff itself, I am more of a I'm more of a utility person versus an aesthetic person. So I was just kind of like have my workshop and my hub and my church and my basically all of my buildings kind of all in a row. Just they all have a function and they're all very functional and they just do their function, right? I don't care about layout and landscaping, but you can do that if you want. And so like these sorts of storylines and quests are interspersed throughout the game where you get new basically ways to build the town, and you can recruit characters to the town, you can make food and things like that. A lot of the stuff I do feel like is a little bit superfluous. I mean, in a way it kind of like is by definition because it wasn't there originally, right? But you know, there's some fun to be had there. I don't have a whole lot to say about this, but I wanted to mention it because it is.
It does give it like some connective tissue, like one large. I saw someone describe this, and this is I'm pretty sure many people have made this analog. Is that this story feels like multiple arcs in like a long running anime where the same characters stick around, but the like the conflict shifts and changes and escalates, like you said. But the connective tissue is Wishvale, for better or for worse. It
Yes.
like tacked on is probably too like it's not charitable enough, but it does you can see where people are coming from, at least in my opinion. Someone might say like, "No, it absolutely feels tacked on," and that would be valid. But I don't think it's involved enough or complicated enough or too much of a drag to feel like it brings anything down, but it doesn't really elevate anything either. It just you always have some place to go back to, and you can put different animals on the ranch or go, put different crops on the fields or get people that you recruit, including like party members, like put them in different houses and pair them up if you want to. There's no like romance system, but you can put them in the same house and play pretend if you want.
It was kind of fun. Like the game doesn't say this explicitly, but the way like some of the dialogue works, Stia, who is one like you're basically your first traveler, almost feels like she's like, "I'll be waiting for you here," and it's like, "What are you talking about, Stia? You're in my party. You've been fighting these bosses with me. Come on." And it kind of feels a little bit incongruent, but still though, I actually think some of the later like Kindlers of the Flame stuff, like story stuff, does get there are some like impactful moments there, and that I'm still sort of stewing on and how they worked out. So it's not just nothing, but
Adam's a champion. He's a glutton for punishment. Though he's going from DQ7 PS1 100+ hour JRPG down to Octopath Zero 100+ hour JRPG now with guides.
I wrote out every path action in the game.
I've been looking at that.
I guess we haven't really talked about path actions, but they return. It's more Octopath 1 flavor than Octopath 2. There's no day or night that you can like shift at whim. And also because it's not 8 separate travelers, you can just do every path action. Like you don't have to like make sure a certain person is available to do a path action. You can just do them all, which I actually kind of like the simplicity of it. But it is kind of fun every time you go back to his town, like, aha, I'm finally strong enough to contend with this guard at the gate because I want to beat him up for his sword or whatever. Or can I finally afford this merchant's random item that's by the shipyard? And of course, some of the side quests. None of the side quests are super like detailed or involved. They usually involve like getting characters back to your town or just small little transactions. And by transactions, I mean it'll be like, I'm a shipwright. I need a shipwright. I need to repair my ship. Oh, there's a shipwright in another town who knows how to do that. I'm going to use the path action to recruit them and bring them to another place. And Octopath Traveler 2 did that as well. I think 1 also did a few things. And they're simple enough. They're more like lock and key puzzles. Like, aha, if I entreat this person and get their item, I can bring it to this person, and they'll give me a thing. And quest completed. And they're not going to blow your mind, but they're enough to explore around and see what different characters have on them. And
A lot of the
if you're able to get
travelers that you recruit, they have their like recruitment quest, and then they have like a follow-up quest later, and that's it in terms of like that character's story. And I'm talking about characters like Goodwin or Alexia or whatever, like characters that aren't really part of the main storyline, but they're not like Octopath 1 characters either. Like the character Alexia, who was a mainstay in my party, she's basically like a researcher,
a
right?
nerd.
Yeah, a nerd.
Okay.
And she's a magic caster, whatever that class is called. And she has her recruitment, and then like her follow-up quest is you go into like the volcano dungeon to research, like to find some lost artifact or something. And like that's it for her as a character, which is fine to me. Like it's that sort of party where like the characters just have like a
It's
little
like
bit
Chrono
of like
Cross, like James said.
yeah, like a little bit of flavor. You know, they don't really participate in the story. They don't have really like a character arc that's just like, yep, that's the character. So a lot of the quests are that, where it's just, you know, giving a flavor to each of the travelers.
It is kind of fun with the Octopath Traveler 1 characters, like also interspersed. And like James said, they're kind of just there. Like they're not really more or less important than any other character. Um, there is a little bit of nostalgia when you return to some older places that I vaguely remember from Octopath 1, like Flame's Grace, or you see like new to me characters interacting with old characters. And there's something a little bit silly, like how it also interfaces with Wishvale. Like for instance, Tressa is one of the Octopath 1 travelers you get earliest, unless you go like out of your way, I suppose. And then like, well, I don't have the shop in Wishville yet, so I'm gonna put Tressa in charge of the salon. Why? Because I can. And then you finally do unlock the shop. And like, all right, Tressa, I'm gonna put you in the shop. So I'm gonna put Terion in charge of the salon. Why? Because I can. So you can be silly with it. And if you do recognize the characters, there's a little bit of nostalgia, but they're not more or less important. And I'm glad they did it that way because I could have easily seen them say like, "Oh, this is an Octopath 1 traveler. They're going to get so much more importance, and they're much better in battle. And you're stupid if you use anyone else." Like, no, not really. They just kind of some of them are good, and some of them are fine. And
Cyrus is still
like right
really
now,
powerful. Like
uh,
once you get Cyrus, he's worth putting in your party.
I have two. I have 2 returning characters and 6 new characters, and I've swapped them out a few times, so I might just play around with others. Like I'm using Therion, I forget if the H is pronounced or not, to do his armor corrosive skill because it can last a long time, and it bolsters everyone else's damage that they provide. So to me, I find that useful. But that's kind of like the thing you said. Like a person might come in this game and there's 30 plus total characters where I might use someone throughout the whole game, and then another person say like, I never even thought to use them. I use this person because they're powerful in this different way. So I think that's really cool. Where that's one thing that this game I think has a leg up on Octopath Traveler 1 and 2 is I don't want to say leg up because I don't want to say like therefore all future Octopath Traveler games must have more than 8 characters, but it does give it a little bit more like decision making, or someone's like, well, this person can use these weapons, this person has this sort of ability, this person is a good buffer, this person's a good healer. What constituents do I want in my battle party? And more on like a studio front, like I was trying to remind myself, James said, hopefully or likely we'll get Octopath Traveler 3. And I was just trying to reminding myself, like, and Adam, you might have a better finger on the pulse than I do of this, but Octopath Traveler 1 and 2 were developed by Acquire, published by Square Enix. I'm not sure who the original developer of Champions of the Continent was. I presume Acquire Talent, but Doki Doki Grooveworks did Zero, but obviously a lot of their work is translating existing, story and assets. And then Acquire was acquired by Katakawa, from
Yes.
Software's head studio. So like who would be on Octopath Traveler 3? Maybe they could still work under Square Enix. Like I'm not sure if they're wholly subsidiary owned by Katakawa, if that would still be doable. And that's the sort of thing like we don't know until we know like what sort of agreement they could come to,
Mhm.
or they could just be different talent entirely on Octopath Traveler 3. who knows? I just don't know.
Speaking of bouncing off
just-
something you said a couple minutes ago about like the character selection, I was helping out Quentin, also a contributor to the site, who was covering this for another website, The Gamer. He reviewed it there, and this is the type of person Quentin is. Like, I was helping him out with the finale of the game, the ending of the game, and of course he had like all like the story important characters in his party. Like, that's just the type of person he is. No judgment at all, but he's just like, if they're like the story important character finally joins your team, like you're making room for them in your party. So his final party was like the big guys. But yeah, by the end of the game, some of the story important characters do become like playable, and I found that just sort of amusing, like the way I go through the game, where I just found like a party that kind of like worked for me, and I made some small adjustments here and there. Where he was just like, nope, I got to use these characters. These are the ones I like, you know, and you're allowed to do that.
You're saying what I'm saying, what I've heard from this conversation is next Octopath Zero thing or whatever. They should have 16 characters in a battle, and it's either going to be laid out as like one long line of 8 characters with the front row and back row, or it's still the same 4, but it's 4 characters attached to each other now in a chain, and that's how it is.
I want a 4x4 grid of characters.
Yes.
Instead of front row, back row, you'll have 4 different rows, each with its own like quirks. It'll just become a tactical RPG.
There you go.
I really do like the front. I know we kind of already talked about it, but I really do like the front row, back row, especially with like and Adam mentioned this, but just recontextualizing, characters will regain HP and SP when they're in the back row. So if they take a lot of damage from a hit, oh yeah,
I think that's actually really important. That I think it's easier to manage BP when you have that second row, just in general.
Mhm. But like they might take a lot of damage from a hit, and you could say like, A, do I heal them? Or B, do I just put them in the back row for a few rounds? And then also certain abilities do more damage if they are brought from the back row to the front row. It's supposed to be like, a sneak attack, I guess is kind of the flavor of it. Or certain attacks will fire off and then place a character in the back row automatically. So like one of the protagonist's main abilities, if you make him a warrior, is a spear skill that hits all enemies and does more damage if they appear from the back row. So this is like not 200 IQ strategy. This is something you can implement pretty early. Is you just make them start in the back row, then on their first turn they get 1 boost, and they can do that ability that will do more damage. And that's not really good on bosses, but for like fodder enemies on the field, it's a good way to like quickly do a lot of damage. Or, I was gonna say quickly do damage quickly. Tautological. It's quickly do damage on weaker enemies. And there's a lot of different like flavor like that where a character can do a hit, go in the back row, maybe a lot guarantee themselves a critical or something, gain some BP, and then they can go back in the front row. And there's just a lot of layers to it. It gives like RPG gearheads something to chew on. It's not all super easy. Just press attack and you win. There is strategy you can implement at different
Now,
levels.
granted, the way I did things with my main character, the majority of the game was I had them as a merchant, and then which allows 2 things. One, you can borrow BP from your partner in the back row, but you also have an arrow skill that restores like 2% of damage dealt as like is it EP or SP? I forget what it's exactly.
SP.
Yeah, SP. It's like, and that made it so if I was not doing a boss, I never had to worry about like SP management, because I could just if an enemy doesn't die from that, like boosted twice or 3 times, I can still just use like other skills from other characters to deal with them, and then just the next random encounter I'd get that SP back first turn because my main character's moving first and using that skill that just is an SP battery. So
cool to see all the different techniques. Like I beat the final boss in 2 turns with this one trick or whatever. Just seeing all the different things that people come up with. And there are ways, just like any game with so many characters and so many systems, there are ways to break the game. That's like, is this perfectly balanced? Probably not, but that's fine. I don't think perfect balance should always be the goal. And it's okay that certain things are like more powerful than others, in my opinion. And I think it's balanced enough that I'm engaged during the story. I'm not bored, like falling asleep during battle because they're so easy. I think they hit a good bar for difficulty. I'm saying that about halfway through. I don't know if that's going to change in like the bestower storylines. I guess Adam or James, did you guys have any final thoughts on Octopath Traveler 0 before we head into the next topic?
No, I think we're good, and I think we spent so much time on this that I don't really want to spend more time talking about the other game I wanted to talk about. So
Well, I was okay taking like this was the main game for, first couple weeks of December for us. And I know that we had a lot of people that oftentimes with a game that just embargo just released, we only had one person really able to speak to it. So the fact that we had multiple, I think it was a really cool discussion on this, especially a game following in such an unorthodox way. Because I don't know if we really have an analog for like compare this game to some other
Yeah,
game.
that's why I think this is a good case study, of this sort of construction of a game. We don't see this very often, if ever.
Yeah, the only other one that comes to mind immediately is like the Mega Man X Dive Offline, then that's Capcom.
I was thinking that too. Just kidding. I agree
Yeah,
with you, but like,
but like I'm always I'm always gonna have like keep my eye out for like these sorts of like conversions because you know me I like checking out mobile games. I usually disagree heavily with the way they monetize them, but I always think there's usually some merit to them of like, hey, there's actually like some like cool shit they're doing. It just sucks that the way that like they're because of the nature of that industry and that market that they have to monetize it like this because there's such a cool thing that they have.
There is one last thing to talk about. Just at a glance, Octopath 0 does not look as good as Octopath 2,
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
which is like kind of obvious. I saw some people like making weird comments about this, like who cares how it looks like or whatever. Like, what are you talking about? It's a visual medium, but like it's understandable. Like why maybe the fidelity is maybe not as good or whatever. Compare acknowledging how this game came to be. Mikhail, did you want to talk about the comparisons that you did on the different platforms? I heard like the Switch version is also maybe not great.
Yeah, so first of all, like I've seen comments about this stuff, like, why are you nitpicking about all this? And I actually replied to James because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Not to go off too much of a tangent, but back when Minecraft released on Switch, probably in 2018 or 2017, I don't remember. I saw a lot of reviews that said, oh, it runs perfectly, looks fantastic, it's the best portable version. Now, at that time, Minecraft was like $30 on Switch, and I had played it for like $7 on my phone where it ran perfectly fine at that time. So I was like, fine, I have a Switch. I want to get new games for it. Let me buy Minecraft. Everyone's saying it runs well. I spent $30 on that digitally, more than I had spent for Minecraft in total on like 3 platforms before that. It ran like dog shit. I was like, this has really annoyed me. And the same thing happened with another game a few months later. I forget which one it was. And from then on, I make sure that anytime I do any technical stuff, I never want to mislead people. So I will like highlight whatever minor issues are there because there's always going to be someone it helps. Like this, like Unity issues in games and stuff like that, where you have like a game which is supposed to run at 60 FPS, but because of the physics or whatever, you have this stuttery scrolling, like, in the pixel remasters and stuff. So that, like, this whole thing where people are criticizing the visuals in Octopath Zero as nitpicking just reminded me of that. And like I've played every HD 2D game on Switch 1 because most of them were like timed exclusive over there. Octopath Traveler Zero looks worse than all of that, even when you play it on the highest end device you can, because some of the source material or like the texture quality is just so bad, it does not look good. So before getting to my comparison, yeah, Octopath Traveler Zero has some really, really ugly aesthetic, like some ugly art design throughout, and no amount of like playing it on a PS5 Pro or like a high end PC is going to save some of it. And like we realized this and we even spoke about it before, I think either in the staff chat or on a previous episode, if I've forgotten that. Uh, yeah, like this is a game which, like, you playing it on a handheld hides some of the blemishes because, yeah, it's not a like it's not the art direction and the art style, or like the texture quality, I should say. I think the aesthetic where they try to do their best is just not the strong suit of it. So yeah, and this was an interesting comparison because it's like on so many different platforms, last gen, current gen, and everything. And because because the Switch 2 version is a key card, people want to know how the Switch 1 version runs on Switch 2. And unfortunately, the Switch 1 version is really bad, to the point where I just think it's worse than every other HD 2D game in terms of how it's optimized and it's polished. Like, it just does not feel good on Switch 1. And if you play it on Switch 2, it runs stable, but it looks so bad and blurry. I just cannot recommend it unless you have no other way to play it. Now, besides that, if you remember, Square Enix put up this thing about what to expect from the frame rate and resolution on different platforms. And they said something like it's 1080 60 on Switch 2, it's 4K 120 on PS5, 4K 120 on Xbox, and stuff like that. Now, every time I write news stories about these things, I have to like put a disclaimer that this is just their target. Even though they aren't saying it, you should not expect it to be a locked experience, and that ended up being true again. So if you play it on Switch, if you play it handheld, it does not look 1080 60 to me. It looks sub 1080, and it's not 60. It has like hitching issues and stuff. The PS5 and Series X versions are like 4K, but they at least it looked 4K to me when I played it on 1440p, and then when I compared some screenshots. But it's not a locked 120 FPS. So this is one of those situations where if you have like a TV or monitor which has VRR, it's fine. Play it as it is. Like, you'll get a smooth experience. I don't on PS5. So I could tell the frame rate is like dropping here and there from 120. So what I did is, when I was playing it on PS5, I actually set my PS5 to 60 FPS or 60 Hertz. Then it was perfectly smooth and loaded fast and stuff like that. So yeah, and that's basically like the long comparison I did for this game. I didn't have access to the Xbox version because code wasn't ready on time. So I ended up testing the demo, and if I do get access to the Xbox version, I will update this. But for now, I like did my testing for the full game on every platform, including PS4, PS5, Switch 1, Switch 2, Steam. But for the Xbox and Windows Store versions, I had to use the demo. So you can read my like comparison covering load times and like basically everything. If you haven't bought it, I will say that you should try out the demo, specifically if you want to like play the Switch 1 version, because if you don't believe me when I say it's really not worth it unless you have no other option, try the demo. But yeah, that's basically my Octopath Zero comparison.
I just wish you could turn off like that depth blurring effect. As far as I can tell, you can't. Even like,
Yeah,
there's a
you could do it in some HD 2D games, but for some reason on this one they've just not, like, you just can't do it on any platform.
There's-
So maybe like an INI edit or something, because I didn't see it on Steam when I was playing it.
No, there's
Yeah,
a
I was trying to.
post-processing effect, which I turned off or low for the bloom, but it doesn't affect the blurring. And there's there's post-processing, and then there's effects. And I tried toggling them, but as far as I can tell, if it's in the distance, like whatever the opposite of foreground is, background, in the background, like, it's always going to be a blurry mess. And that was apparent from like the early Traveler, where they're like early trailer, where they were like running up towards like a big castle, and it's like this big blurry mess, and it's not even like a soft subtle blur. It's like this really ugly blur, in my opinion.
Stable depth of field, but yeah, I agree. I was trying to turn that off too, and I couldn't. The closest thing is like minimizing the vignetting effect, and that's
Yeah.
about it.
Well, thank you everyone for our detailed discussion on Octopath Traveler Zero. I know that I'm going to keep playing this throughout. Like, it's going to be like my Steam Deck holiday game, because I know it's like a 80-ish hour game, start to finish. 4 arcs of an anime.
Before we move on to like the article shout out section, since this is our last regular episode of the year, this doesn't have to be like a whole long thing, but I'm curious to know like what are your guys' like sort of like video game plans are like throughout the rest of the month to our next regular episode next year. Just like what are you gonna play, like, over the break, for example? Like, what do you intend to get to? What are you interested in checking out?
I'll start. I
Okay.
want to play Digimon Time Stranger before we meet next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that
I'm-
like I was debating games that like I think were well regarded, but also like that I could probably beat. or at least get close to beating in like a week and a half. I'm like 100 line, well regarded, but seems like very, very, very long. So maybe not. Digimon, well regarded, but probably not as long as 100 lines. I'll go with that. And I've heard,
Confirmed.
Josh and other people talk about how it kind of feels like, almost like a RPG from like the PlayStation 2 era in terms of like it's just design ethos and things like that. Like that's me.
It's Soul Hackers 3.
Right. So like let me check it out. And so that's my plan. And then over the holiday, like I haven't gotten around to like Pokemon. That might be my travel game. That and Metroid Prime.
Oh,
Yeah. I started Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 last night, which I'm kind of glad I waited until now because apparently somewhere down the line, the game did not have HDR at launch, but apparently they patched in a native HDR implementation somewhere along the lines.
Oh, I didn't know it had HDR now. I definitely did not when I played it.
Yeah, not the best HDR I've seen, but it's definitely not anywhere near the worst. So I'm playing that a bit, and it's like, yeah, it's again, I just started it last night, but it's like, yeah, I'm gonna try and finish that before the Game of the Year podcast, and also at least get a decent amount into Dragon Quest II HD 2D. I figured those were the two that were most important. I'm sure I'll love Digimon when I get around to it.
Yeah,
but we're all
There's
too many
makes
games.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna finish Dragon Quest 2 for the holidays, but I'm also gonna be the guy that's gonna be doing ROM hacking instead. I am gonna play the Girl Lancer fan patch instead. That was leaked out to the public. I think it was not supposed to go in the public, but it's
For
out
what
there.
game?
Bro Lancer,
Bro Lancer.
the original Girl Lancer. It's an Atlas.
Grow Lancer. I thought it's a Bro Lancer. Bro Lancer.
Bro.
A Grow
Girl
Lancer. Got it.
Yeah. So
cool,
that's
cool.
kind of like the OG deal field, okay?
All right. Okay, I didn't know that it was actually a thing in development. That's cool. Oh.
There's a full patch out there. It has a little trolling. When you boot up the game, it'll be like the character dialogue instead of the guy will say, "I'm a mercenary." It's like this is a fan patch. It's not quite ready yet, but the full game is actually translated. So it is what it is, right?
Brian, Mikhail, what do you guys want think of checking out?
I was obviously you first, Mikhail.
Okay, sure, cool, thanks. So, like I said before, I decided to do something stupid, and I said I'm gonna beat Inazuma 11 and the 100 line before 2026. Obviously, not a smart decision, but then I had to prioritize which one I could do first. So I decided to do the 100 line. I started a new save, so I've been playing that. I think I've played, since I said I would, I've played 65 hours of it. I'm on the longest route, apparently. I won't say what it is because apparently it's spoiler, but yeah, I'm very close to the 3/4 point of that. And I will probably be playing 100 line for about 20 hours more before getting back to Inazuma 11 story mode. Now, the problem with Inazuma is we'll talk about it in a bit, but they keep announcing and patching shit every 2 days. Go to sleep, man. Go be with your family. I don't know what level 5 is doing, but yeah, that's I want to do those two, and I haven't beaten Kingdom Come 2, but I think I'll be able to manage it before we record. I've played quite a bit of it. I won't be able to do the DLC though, so I'm not even gonna touch that. But yeah, my main thing is to finish this specific route in 100 line, play a bit of the other one, and then play as much Inazuma as I can before we record. And for the holidays itself, I have some family visiting from the States and stuff, and I probably will end up just playing some Mario crap with them. So yeah.
Hey, Mario Kart is a fun family game.
Mario crap.
Yeah, I'll keep mine short. Octopath Traveler 0, and then late December, early January. I want to play the way my brain works is I want to play Rise of the Ronin so that I'm caught up by the time Neo 3
Yeah,
hits.
same.
I know it's a weird way to think of it because they're not even the same series, but that's just I've wanted to play that.
Design ethos perspective that it is definitely worth I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. If nothing else, kind of brace myself for what the worst case scenario for that PC port's gonna be. So
yeah.
Don't worry, I will try it on Steam Deck for us all.
There we go. We have a champion here.
Okay, Mikhail, I'm figuratively looking at you straight in the eyes. Have you done an article about this yet? Have you done an article about this?
About
for
what?
Rise of the Ronin?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so you said you're going to test it on Steam Deck. Are you going to like write up about it? Because I can put it on my MSI Claw.
I did Rise of the Ronin already.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I did Rise of the Ronin already. In fact, I might before Neo 3. Neo 3 code is probably going to be January if things go the way they normally do for Koei Tecmo. But I might revisit Neo 1 and 2 because I haven't really played much of them on Steam Deck recently. So I want to see how those are. But I honestly don't expect much from Neo 3 looking at those specs which you posted out.
They're
In fact,
the exact same as Rise of the Ronin. So
yeah, but the thing is, like, I feel like I don't know. This game is newer, so I feel like it might run worse. We'll find out soon, I guess. But yeah, this is definitely something. I'm curious how it runs for you on your handheld as well. We'll see how that goes.
All right, that's cool. I'm glad. I kind of feel weird now because everyone's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this for Game of the Year stuff." Me, I'm just like, I don't know. I've been feeling visual novels lately, and I've been like, I decided finally since it was on sale, all three, the Shell games, also known as Kara no Shoujo, were on sale together on Steam. So I got those and put the Shirobune patch in, so they're all uncensored and stuff. And there's like a well regarded series in the visual novel circles, like highly respected. A lot of people always praise it whenever it's brought up, like, but it's also very intense and visually gruesome in the sense that like the TLDR version of the premise is like you're a detective uh investigating murders in rural Japan, and I want to say like 1930s 1940s sort of time period. And it's, it's very visually gruesome, very like there's some gore, there's some decaying bodies and flesh and stuff like that. Like they don't hold back on that sort of stuff, but it's very interesting in the way that they frame things and the way that they have been kind of unfolding the story and the characters that you meet along the way. So I
That's on
haven't.
sale right now? Is it?
I don't know if it's still on sale on Steam. I got it a few days ago. I don't know if it's still on
Oh
sale.
no.
This
It
is the
was it was
Shiravyun thing, right? They
yeah
published it and localized it.
yeah yeah. They like made remakes of it and stuff like. Well, there was remakes from the developer. I think it was like Innocent Gray, and I think Shirobune localized it and brought it over and stuff like that. It
Yeah,
was at a
I
good price,
remember.
Chow.
Yeah, I remember it was interesting checking it out, but now it's like, oh shit, it's not on sale anymore.
It'll
Um,
probably go on sale again on the winter sale for sure.
well, I
Yeah.
guess it is what it is. I was interested in checking this other game called Detective Instinct Farewell My
Oh
Beloved, but
yeah, me
I hear
too.
it's
Yeah.
very short, so I'm
you
not
know
sure
what?
it's
You know
worth
what?
the price
Actually,
tag.
let me talk about that because I wasn't able to talk about it last week. They randomly sent me a code, so I played that. I actually did go through it. I wasn't sure if it was something we could justify. Well, I was in the middle of Octopath Zero, so I didn't really have the time to write up something. But yeah, I played that. It's pretty good.
There's like the almost like the Famicom Detective Club style like new adventure game. I forgot who the developers were, but when I look at some videos and screenshots, it very much is evocative of that adventure game style.
Yep, 100%. It's they said that they developed it because they were inspired by a bunch of games on the DS. So really, the main inspirations were actually like 999 and like Ace Attorney.
Mhm.
But obviously, they've played Famicom Detective Club, and there is a lot of that DNA there too. Uh, Not too much to say. If you played a Famicom Detective Club, you know what to expect from the gameplay. I think I have two major complaints. Well, first off, let me say the good things. Great soundtrack, incredible backgrounds. Like the visuals for this game, incredible. Nailed it 100%. The puzzles are a little bit too simple. There's like only one that would have tripped me up if I wasn't like taking screenshots of like dialogue. But everything else is just super, super simple. And like the times I got tripped up, I was like overthinking something because I was expecting there to be more to it, but it was actually just kind of what you see was what you get. The other thing is that the game's length is very short. It's like around the same length, if not a little bit shorter than the original Famicom Detective Club, The Missing Heir. and that's definitely something I've noticed people talking about on the Steam like reviews. It very much feels like, and I don't mean this in a negative way. It feels like one of those like prologue demos you would see for like indie games on Steam where people are making a game and it's not going to be ready for a while, but they put up a demo, but it's not actually a demo. It's like a standalone like prologue or like a prequel that's basically acting as a advertisement for what's going to be a later game. That's what it feels like. And it definitely feels like to me that this game's story leaves a couple of different avenues open, but it absolutely feels like if it's been successful enough, which it seems like it has been, they're probably going to make more games in this universe, and they have like a specific idea in mind for where that can go from there. It's good, worth playing. Just yeah, if ironically enough, I would say if you want to get into these like adventures, like adventure games, like classical like point and click adventure games, like Famicom Detective Club and like 999 or Ace Attorney, this would be like the perfect one to start with because paradoxically, if you're a fan of the genre, you're going to be maybe a little bit underwhelmed compared to if this is your like first rodeo. My opinion.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely like when it's on discount. I'll definitely check it out. Those are always in my wheelhouse. Love adventure games of that style. Cool.
Before we get into news, we do have a fair bit of like other features up on the site for different opportunities we've had or opinions or editorials that people have written up. Obviously, I'll start out just with a reminder of James's Octopath Traveler 0 review and then Mikhail's kind of technical feature for Octopath Traveler 0 across Switch 2, PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox, and PC. And then the second one I have listed is a game that we covered back when it released in mid-November. But Josh, you finally finished. I shouldn't say finally. That makes it sound like it was on a due date. You did finish up Inazuma 11, and we've talked about it on the podcast about your thoughts on it, the strengths of that game, and then like the reception and the word of mouth and how well it's done in those avenues. But
Yeah,
you kind of formalized your thoughts into an article on the site.
Yeah, before I get into that, I do also want to shout out all the guide work that's gone into the Octopath Zero stuff. Obviously, Adam,
Oh yeah,
Mikhail, and all the other contributors. Even the external ones like Quentin helping out Adam behind the scenes on confirming some of the stuff for the guides. Obviously, massive thank you to all of you to in helping out the entire community on that front.
Yeah, if you're looking for something in Octopath Zero, I found it and I cataloged it. So check our site.
just DM Adam and he'll give you the answer.
Yeah, pretty much.
uh, but yeah, so it like I mentioned I finished up Inazuma 11 Victory Road's single player story mode like a few weeks ago, and I was thinking, I was like, how do I write about this game, because I'm still obviously going to the Chronicle mode. They continue to update the game, but I don't want to. I feel like there has to be something said about this game, but talking about this game is very challenging, and Mikhail will know, because not even just from like the amount of modes and things you can do in the game, but also just thinking about like encapsulating the whole story about this game. And big shout outs to Sal Romano, who runs Gematsu, a good friend of ours, the great work he does on Gematsu, for cataloging almost the history of the development of this Inazuma 11 title. Probably one of the very few, if not only, English sources of like who constantly kept updates and archives of like this game's development throughout the years. So I leaned heavily on his coverage of like what the trials and tribulations were of Victory Road's development. Even before it became Victory Road, it was like 2 to 3 other Inazuma 11 games before it became Victory Road. And I was like, I want to tell this story, but I don't want this to be the main focus of the article. So that's the way I introduced this game. It was like, hey, before we even got here, you really have to like hear about like the hell of development this game went through. And I tried to summarize that up succinctly in a way that like was consumable, and also talk about like what are the main charms about this game from my perspective as a total newcomer of Inazuma 11. I'm sure a lot of people who are playing this are in that same spot of like, hey, I'm gonna give this game a shot because it looks cool. I heard it looks cool from someone of like I've never really engaged the Inazuma 11 series before, or maybe they like saw like one of the like an anime episode or the anime series before it, but it's like one of the older ones. It's like what are like these games like these days? And I was just like, I didn't know what to expect after all of that, so I really wanted to try to convey as spoiler free as possible about like, hey, this is like why this kind of one of the most captivating stories in games this year, like secretly, and really one of the most fascinating main characters in an RPG this year because of the way he conducts himself, the way he connects with characters not only from your team as you're recruiting them, but also all the opponents that you go up against and the main rivalry he has with the son of the protagonist of the first Inazuma 11 game. That's sort of like the main quote unquote antagonist, which is more so treated as like the secondary main character in that single player story, and how their philosophy and ideologies are direct opposites of each other. So you have this interesting like parallelism that's coming from opposite directions in between them, and how their first encounter like fundamentally changes their outlook on life because they cannot fathom the way that they conduct themselves, even from like a whole ideology standpoint. Like, how can you treat soccer and like like see soccer as like this, or why do you even participate in soccer even though you have an illness that doesn't allow you to partake in it directly? Why not just move to something else that you would be happier with? Stuff like that. Just like very interesting questions that like the main story like posits towards its players and towards its characters, and I found that fascinating on that front. And I tried to introduce that concept to people to kind of get them a better understanding of it, and potentially maybe garner some interest. Like, hey, don't sleep on this game. It's actually pretty cool. But also acknowledging, and we're gonna get onto this with like one of the article shout outs on this is like, there's also a messy a hidden messiness to the development of this game where there were some articles 2 years ago where level 5 was messing around with generative AI in terms of like promo material of their titles, and having and utilizing it as like voice holder voices for the meantime before getting actual real voice actors to actually do the performance of their characters. And that's as far as we know in terms of like what was reported. We don't know if there's anything more that they did with generative AI outside of that or beyond that.
Also, the one thing that I always bring up when this article is mentioned, because I did like go to the original like slides and like translated some of them. And it's like on like even just like looking at the presentation, which it's clear this was a talk that they gave in person. So we were only getting maybe half of the information, because the way things go, any sort of talk, you're going to see the slides, and they're going to be talking about the bullet points they've listed on there, and then they're going to go into more in depth to explain what those bullet points actually mean in practice, more so than they can on like these specific slides. So it's like on its own, it doesn't look great what they talked about, especially with the deck complete stuff. But it could be a case where it's like, okay, we're just trying to help like get descriptions for these quests. The actual writing might be all like done by a person, but for like making blurbs for different like areas in the game, they might just be using it for that. We don't know. None of us were there at that talk in 2023. It's just
we're working off of like info that's publicly available that was shared. That's all we can address to it. That's the reality of the situation.
And to be clear, like I don't blame anyone if they think that the information that we do have that is publicly available, which confirms that they are using generative AI in their workflow from like, and the way it's structured is, what's the best way of putting this? A lot of people have been honing in on the idea of, oh, they're only using this type of generative AI in this project because they only mention in this project, when I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's more likely that these are just using specific games as an example for where they are using these specific types of AI. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not using all these AI in all their projects. They just use specific examples to showcase them. And because, again, it's just the presentation, and none of us were there for the talk. That's speculation, but it's just it's tough to talk about.
Yeah,
It's tough.
like I said, like there's a messiness to it because we're working off of so little info. So that's why I had to, be very specific of like, hey, I'm with you. I abhor the use of generative AI because it fundamentally robs the creativity of humanity and relies on plagiarism to fuel it. That's not even counting like its detrimental impact on the environment, the power of our data centers. We now see like the cost of RAM prices. Look what the fuck is happening there, and obviously it's being used as an excuse to replace jobs that people should be doing, and and based on the information that I saw in the game, I'll tell you that like after the main story is done and the credits rolled, it was over 20 minutes of like hundreds, if not thousands, of people who worked on the game of all different fields in the development of video games: voice talent, key animators, model designers, musical composers, recording engineers, etc., etc. So it's not like there were many, many, many people around the globe who were involved in this game, and maybe they were properly credited. Even like keyframe animators from like Mappa, who in some ways they do a better job crediting like Mappa animators than maybe the studio themselves, if for some anime productions, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's and on the Steam page for Inazuma 11, they don't have any AI usage disclosure. Obviously, that can be manipulated by people, right? Of like they can choose not to say anything on their Steam pages. So we're working only off of info that we have been given publicly, that we know as much as you do, and I try to work my way through that and make my stance clear on that. That's why I think it's one of this is like a game that's like very, 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 very difficult to talk about because you go about it so many ways, and also there's also a due diligence attached to it where you have to acknowledge that there's a messiness both on the development history of this, but also because we live in this point in time where many developers and publishers and people involved in the gaming industry are pushing for more usage of generative AI, creating them, and
Yeah.
it kind of it murkies the waters. It mucks up the discussion a lot amongst people because people like who may not have the vocabulary or the know-how or are not really familiar with what's going on. Like I don't blame people who are less knowledgeable about this subject because it's such a vast and complex subject to talk about that like people don't know. Like you'll see people remarks like, hey, like what is an acceptable use of generative AI? What degree is it okay? And it's like before we get to that question, it's like should there even be an acceptable a use of it at all
Yeah.
because of like because now we're having that discussion in these games. That means that we're feeding into the narrative that the wealthy corporations who are implementing this into these projects, like now we're making it more socially acceptable, making it more okay within the public space of like it's okay to have these sorts of technologies inside like the games themselves. Even
Yeah.
to why we're even having these questions is just fueling that narrative and
It's
rewarding them for
yeah.
implementing it in the first place.
It's very depressing, and I think the thing that really gets me is that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. Junior was not able to join us on this podcast, but they were going to talk about the Let It Die Inferno review. But I feel like one of the problems is it's multifaceted in the sense that I don't mean to be a doomer, but I feel like when games like Let It Die Inferno drop and people like point to the fact that it's like critically and so far commercially bombing is like proof that generative AI is a deal breaker for the majority of people. I don't think that's necessarily true, and people need to be realistic when we have stuff like the finals and Arc Raiders and all sorts of other games that, if anything, prove that the problem for a lot of people isn't even necessarily how it impacts workers, but rather if they can tell that a piece of work is using AI. Because if you cannot tell when you pick it up on like the PlayStation Store or Xbox Live or the Switch Store, people generally probably don't care. And And companies look at stuff like people like they don't pay attention to what people are saying on Twitter or Blue Sky most of the time. They pay attention to whether a game sells and whether it's like critically successful.
Right.
And when games like Arc Raiders and even before that, like again, the finals, when they are like one of the most successful games of the year where most people are probably correctly attributing its success to part of the reason why Call of Duty has underperformed this year by all accounts. The other question we have to ask is that even if you think that a certain level of AI is like okay or not okay, the real thing is that we need to like focus on, okay, if this technology is not going to go away, which realistically, I don't think that's a guarantee that it's going to go away. And I don't think anything as consumers do is going to have an impact on that. I think if anything, the main reason why AI might go away is when the bubble eventually bursts. But assuming that it doesn't fully go away, how are we going to deal with like regulation or stuff like that? Because like even in a vacuum, like people are split on how they feel about the way that Arc Raiders does the AI, because none of us have seen the contracts for the voice actors. We don't know what the verbiage of those contracts are.
They're being like deliberately dodgy about it too. Like they don't offer clear cut transparent answers about it, about their usage. That's done by design, you know.
Yeah. It's like no matter how things turn out, we should be having conversations about what sort of regulation needs to be in place. So in the possible future where AI doesn't just go away when the bubble bursts.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult topic because like
and I've had people that have accused me of just giving up for saying, hey, we should probably be talking about like what regulation would look like. Right, and it's like, we shouldn't just have it all. And it's like, I mean, in a perfect world, I agree. Yeah. But in the world we live in, Arc Raiders is one of the most successful games of the year, which tells the people developing games only one thing, that people like us are the minority.
Yeah, and like to be clear, like hey, listener, if you play Arc Raiders and you enjoy it, you're not a bad person. It's totally okay. Yeah. It's totally okay if you like it.
That's explicitly the reason why I said that people are mixed on it, because like in a perfect world, depending on the verbiage of that of those contracts, there might not be anything ethically or morally wrong with it. Just we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah. So that's to be an ongoing topic. We're probably going to have to discuss it more and more as unfortunately, more of this generative AI technology creeps up in game development. And of course, that'll probably be in the RPG space as well. And we do our best to try and navigate that responsibly to the best of our ability. For example, if there's a game that we're reporting on that has generative AI elements that is disclosed on Steam, we always try to drive home the narrative of like, hey, if they disclose that, please put it like near the top of your of your article, so people know right away. There's nothing wrong with reporting that this game exists and that this is what's been announced, but hey, let people know upfront what this game has, because there's been many times where I'm like, I go to a Steam. There's already been many times I go to a game on Steam and I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I scroll down, it's like, oh, a lot of this is being made with generative AI. And for me personally, not to say that like it should be for anyone else, but for me personally, I just don't mess with that stuff. I don't like it. I'm just like, I'll just move on. There are many other cool games to me.
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest problem I had with the Let It Die Inferno, besides the fact that they are using AI for so much of the game, which is a deal breaker for me. Again, I can only speak for myself. I don't want to play games that have generative AI in them. But they didn't disclose that until we were already a portion of the way into the review cycle. Like they didn't disclose it until after they sent code, so we had to break it to Junior that this game has generative AI, and they already kind of had like a feeling because of stuff that was in the game. Like obviously, it's like this is weird, but it's like I think that's the thing that really pissed them off. Is it's like
when I saw that and I shared it with Junior, when I pinged Junior, I'm like, oh no, it's gonna be bad. But yeah. I guess there's like a good time as any, like, to shout out, hey, Junior's really fantastic Let It Die Inferno review. And once again, they wanted to join us for this podcast, but couldn't due to time zone differences. But the work speaks for itself, and I fully agree and stand by Junior in their review on how they decided to handle the Let It Die Inferno review, because I can understand the perspective of people saying, hey, why don't you just like give us like a very basic breakdown of like what the game is like, and what players can expect when they get a hands on, like what does the game have and how does it play, and like what looks good, what sounds good, what's the story like. And it's like, before we can even have that conversation, like many portions of this game where, and now that it's been fully disclosed to what extent they've used generative AI on this it was done within that angle, and is discussed from that angle because Junior is a big fan of the first Let It Die game. Very, very big fan. I have many friends that were also big fans of the first Let It Die game, and that the fundamental core foundation of that first Let It Die was a celebration of artists in a variety of genres, musically, artistically. It was um, a powerful visual and audio force that blended so many genres from different artists together. And the fundamental core foundation of Let It Die Inferno, based on what they disclosed and how they've implemented generative AI, even in the music stems of their game, is a fundamental betrayal of that. It's like, how do you even begin to discuss this game earnestly when they have already betrayed the fundamental nature of what that
The original Let It Die, one of its
game is?
biggest selling points was its whole presentation, its aesthetic, its soundtrack. Like, they commissioned all of these like smaller like indie bands to make songs for the game, and then the official sequel to the game is like, we AI generated the music. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. So
I've had some friends, which I don't know if I fully agree, but I understand where they're coming from, where they said that if they didn't have to disclose the AI, people would have just assumed a lot of this was a stylistic choice. And they feel like that, cynically, that part of the reason why this game is the one that has so much generative AI is because if it wasn't for that disclosure, it could have slipped under the radar. And that, again, I don't know if I agree with that, but I can absolutely understand where they're coming from. And if that is the case, that makes me feel even worse about the whole situation.
it is like, as the technology evolves over time, I understand that like it gets harder and harder to distinguish what is human made and what is AI made as the technology evolves, and that's going to be unfortunately and
Especially,
depressingly going to be more so the case of like, okay, we have to start determining whether this was made by a human or not.
especially in the case of a lot of these developers, almost all of these developers are saying things along the lines of, we'll use AI at a base stage and then we will like edit over or iterate from there with a human, in which case you'll never know. It reminds me of how like Falcom was saying just like over a year ago, how they are going to be using AI at the concept stage, but you're never going to see any of that AI in the final project because it's just being used for, let's say a character designer is like, okay, let me put in these ideas for what sort of character I want to go for as a prompt. And then I'll get all these different ideas for what a character like that might look like. I'll choose one that fits what I'm going for the most and then iterate from there. And in that case, would that count would that count for disclosure on Steam if it's just being used for concepts and no actual assets are using that AI? I don't know. It's one of those things. Yeah.
I kind of want to.
I think Steam is gonna have to like figure out how to do this, because if it's an opt-in thing for devs to disclose it on their own, most will just not do it. It needs to be like when you have de novo or like anti-cheat, where it's just there as like a warning. They need to do it that way.
Well,
I think that's the only way to like. Go ahead.
Well, the problem is that would that even fit for this specific use case, which isn't just Falcom that's been saying this. Other companies have been saying that they're going to use it for the exact same.
Oh
use
yeah, I
case.
agree with you. Like in the case of that, like this is like a whole other topic, which like everyone's gonna have to like decide on their own where they draw the line. But I just think, for if something is in the end product it needs to have a warning on Steam, like just like how you have DRM or just like how you have anti-cheat, where it's just mentioned, like include like how you have Origin or like not Origin, what's it called now? EA Play or like I don't know what the piece of shit launcher which they use for Wild Hearts, which like bricked my save, but whatever, like that kind of stuff. You need to have it displayed like that, not all the way at the bottom, which most people are not even going to scroll to.
Yeah, I hate that it's like all the way at the bottom, sort of hidden, and you kind of have to fish for it. And I know like certain other like outlets or marketplaces like DL site has like two different filters for it. Where like one is like if it's like if the game was significant parts of it were made by Gen AI, and then there's like another filter that's like there's elements of Gen AI, but most of it is like human made. So it's like and that gets murky of like where's the threshold of that. So it's a really 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 difficult like boundary of like well how do you inform the public correctly and accurately on this matter? It's very annoying. It's very annoying. Obviously, I don't want to drown out others like Brian, Adam, or Chow with just the general conversation and the Let It Die Inferno review. Like any thoughts you guys have?
I can't speak to it probably like we don't have like a firm stance like Adam or Alex in terms of like we have to be flexible because it's changing at a very rapid pace. But my mindset is Junior. All of our reviews have a name attached. They are reviews, you know, underneath the RPG site banner, but that doesn't mean therefore we all agree that if a game has AI, we're gonna have the same exact stance that Junior did. Like that's not necessarily true. Like in the
Mhm.
future, someone else might write a review for a game that has AI and might never bring it up because that's their stance. Like it's in this case, it's so new. It's like, oh, I see RPG sites just gonna take this stance on any game that has Gen AI of any level. What about this case or this case or this case? Like James was bringing up, but it's not quite as easy as that. Like it's going to be a pervasive thing going forward, and there's not going to be one. It's going to be this way, pr- completely this way in perpetuity. Like no, not
Before our
necessarily.
listeners before our listeners go into this this is definitely something that will be brought up during the game of the year cast discussions. Like there was at one point during the development of Expedition 33 where they used generative AI
Yep,
for
I was
placeholder
thinking about that
textures.
one.
It's like okay, so
And even
where
then,
do we go on that?
that's
Where do we go
even
on that?
even then
Exactly.
that's a little bit murky because it's like,
Yeah.
did they intend for it to be generative AI or was it just in the asset pack that they use for stock assets? That's
Yeah.
still something that's not entirely clear. It's
Mhm.
like
So it's it gets more and more complicated and complex, and every case is case by case. It's not something that's blanket like you said, Brian. It's not something that's like a blanket thing, right? It's a case by case scenario, and then if because it's such a case by case scenario, we start getting the discussion of like where is the boundary line? What is the threshold of what is ethically and morally and professionally acceptable in that
like
regard, right?
yeah, like
On a
even
professional
if you're like fully hard stance against AI, which I understand, it's important for you to actually grasp how big, like I've seen a lot of people even on Blue Sky saying, oh, all these people saying that AI is going to be in like pretty much every game. I don't believe that's true, that it's going to be in almost every game, but I also think that the opposite, where it's like, oh, it's not being used in the majority of projects, is necessarily true either. Maybe not for your neck of the woods, maybe not for your studio, maybe not for most indie games, but that's an entirely different thing compared to AAA production, especially when it gets into Japan, where it seems like every major developer has said that they're using it internally. It's just one of those things where people need to, I don't want to say be realistic, because again, I agree fundamentally that I wish there was no AI whatsoever, and I do think that we need to have like a framework in order to identify how AI is being used in a project so people can make their own decisions about whether they want to support a game or not. The problem is that like we've just spent the last like half hour going over, is it's incredibly hard to do so in practice.
Yeah, but hey, shout out to Junior for the very 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 difficult and challenging task of how you even tackle a game like Let It Die Inferno in terms of
Yeah.
like how you begin to even review it and attach a score to it. Um, it's it's gonna be a challenging future. You know.
Yep.
And then like I guess I can't speak for Junior, but like if it was a hypothetical review that I wrote, like you don't have to agree with it. We're not. If you look at that and say I don't agree at all with the score, like that's as always has
That's the
always been
point of
valid.
reviews.
Like
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
we're not saying it's this way. If you don't believe us, you're wrong. It's like no, reviews are not right
If
or
you,
wrong.
if you listener have purchased Let It Die Inferno or enjoying it, it's okay. You're not a bad person.
Unless you're harassing like Junior in the review comments or on social media, in which case you are a bad person. You should
10
feel
million
bad.
%. Yes. Don't do that. Don't do that for anyone really. And just fundamentally speaking.
Outside of the review space, we do have a lot of like speaking of developers, and I know this is a very broad sense, but we had some opportunities this week to speak to developers of I don't want to say indie scale, but smaller scale developers, definitely on AAA, for a bunch of different projects that are kind of releasing in this last half of the year. So Adam's got an interview opportunity up on the site, and then Mikhail has a couple as well. So I'm going to start out with Adam, talking about a game that I know is kind of near and dear to your heart, Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered, specifically the international version that just released. Now, maybe just give us a quick reminder of like what this is, because people might say, didn't that already release? And then what your opportunity to speak with Red Art Games was for this release.
Yeah, so I feel like practically nobody knows this, but coming out this next week is Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered International. And what this is this is a Switch and PlayStation 4 port of, and PlayStation 5 of Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered, which came out 3 years ago. The only difference is that now there's a physical version that you can get either in North America or Europe, and there are now more language options. You can use the Japanese dub now. You couldn't directly use it in the release 3 years ago, and there are now FIGS translations for subtitles, so French, Italian, German, and Spanish. So for people in those countries, which Red Art Games, the publisher, is French, who want to play games, in your native language, you can now do that with this release for Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered. I won't go into why I love Romancing Saga and Saga in general again right now, but I had a chance to basically ask some questions to both Red Art Games, who is the publisher of the international version, as well as Akitoshi Kawazu, the founder, the boss of the Saga series, the creator of the Saga series, still very active in the series, about this release. And it's actually probably the most interesting thing about this release is how it came about. Is that Masanori Ichikawa basically mentioned on Twitter one day, like 2.5 years ago, like he wants Saga games to be more available worldwide at retailers, but didn't have the means to do that. And then Romain Mahut at Red Art Games, apologies if I mispronounced your name, basically reached out to Ichikawa and basically said, hey, we're interested in helping you out with this. What can we do here? And then they met up and basically made it a reality. So it's basically through social media, they were able to make this international release. Now, as the game itself is, besides the languages, which is a big difference, but besides that, the game itself is the same. So if you already bought the digital version of the game, this is actually going to be a new SKU from a new publisher, new SKU unit. But otherwise, now there's just going to be a physical release for people who want to have it on their shelf, and more languages. Not sure there's much else to say than that.
So wait, if you have the old one, they didn't have the Japanese dub on the get-go? Is that what you're saying?
No, there was no. You couldn't buy the Western release of the original version did not have Japanese dub. I think you could probably like inject it somehow, through unofficial means, but it wasn't included in the game. No.
No. Okay. So let's say if you have it now, would they like patch that into the game now? Or
no, because this is a separate publisher, a separate version of the game. So there's no update, there's no patch. It's just a new version, and that's kind of the weird reality of it. When Red Art Games said, "Hey, let us do this," so it's kind of like their version of the game. So and that also means, for instance, that like this does not have a PC version. Red Art Games does not do PC games. So the PC version of this game is unaffected. There is no other version of it. So it's kind of weird in that case, because this is the Red Art Games version of Minstrel Song.
Yeah, like I
So
have two icons on my Switch. Like with one is the original Square Enix one, and one is the new Red Art one. So like they're literally two different icons and two different games on my Switch now.
Are they different enough that you can tell immediately?
The icons are completely different.
Okay.
So like the original is just the the white background art which they did for that. It doesn't even have the name. The international version has the new logo and it says international specifically, and it has a black background. So there's no like
I know in your case you run into situations where there's multiple versions of a game and they all have the completely identical icon. You're like, I don't know which is which.
Yeah, like with Octopath Traveler 0, the icons are exactly the same. The only way to tell which one is Switch 2 and which one is Switch 1 is by pressing like plus and going like, then it lists its Nintendo Switch 2 software, because like Nintendo doesn't have the platform like how Sony does or like Microsoft does for cross-gen stuff. So yeah, like it is. But yeah, like Red Art said that they wanted to differentiate it enough, so they have it that way. It's a little weird because I actually collect the SaGa games physically, so this release isn't really that much of a big deal for me because I bought Minstrel Song physically from Singapore when I was on holiday, so I don't see any need to buy this. But it's good for people who like don't import stuff from Asia, because this was literally an Asia only game before physically, so now you can just order it in North America and Europe easily. So that's good to see.
Yeah, it's cool. This is a whole initiative and the way it was brought about. I mean, it's almost it's the closest you'll get to almost like a grassroots initiative to globalizing a game. Oddly enough, it's a really cool thing to see that with Red Art Games pushing for it.
I had the chance to ask Kawazu a few more questions. This is actually like my third time interviewing Kawazu about SaGa, and he didn't really offer much that we haven't heard already from him for these games, other than that he says it's very important that people. Here's one thing that he said: fans being able to experience our games in their own language have a much richer experience, which is absolutely wonderful. So like he sees the value in like, hey, if this company is going to, publish this game for us to have more languages available, then he's for that. And he supports that. Like he supports the translation of more languages.
For sure.
And then one thing I also found kind of fun, and Mikhail would find it fun too, is I asked him how he likes his coffee, which we've started doing since Mikhail has joined. And Kawazu says that Luca Galante, the developer of Vampire Survivors, gifted me an espresso machine, and the espresso makes it so delicious that it's scary. And I just thought that was kind of amusing that it kind of just shows like the camaraderie among like people of all nationalities and ages and places and even genres, where the Vampire Survivors guy gave this Square Enix guy an espresso machine that he's really now fond of.
One of my friends, it's a super big coffee head, and she's been like getting like over the last year has been getting into all sorts of like specific like coffee tricks, including like espresso and whatnot. She saw that interview and was like, of course Kawazu would be a big espresso guy, which because like
it also calls back to like, hey, remember that collab that Vampire Survivors did with the Emerald Beyond earlier this year? It's like
remember how the whole reason that even came out and was free is because Square Enix wasn't sure about it. It was literally less of a pain in the ass to release it free than to figure out the licensing agreement for like paying for it. And the main dev is just like, fuck it, I just want to release the DLC because I love SaGa. I don't. Vampire Survivors has made so much money. I don't need any more money. I'm gonna put out this for free.
Just a very, very small thing, but like it just makes me so excited that like they're doing basically Vampire Survivors Warhammer next year. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm so in.
Does that mean if you were playing Minstrel Song Remastered like on a PlayStation, you could get 2 platinum trophies?
Yes.
There you go, Adam.
No.
Goal for next year.
Beating
I was like, no.
beating that 8-jewel god guy, whatever his name is hard enough to do once. I'd want to do it twice.
You need to find the real like the SaGa community sickos that will convert like the save file of the old like quote unquote old version that was previously released into like the new international version. So when you convert that and boot that up, it'll just pop all the trophies that you already got for it.
There you go. And then, Mikhail, you had a couple opportunities for interviews as well. We'll start out with this one, a game that we covered earlier in the year from a very small studio. East versus Trails in the Sky Alternative Saga, released in October in the West for the first time officially. Refint Games was I think wasn't this their debut, like, official project?
Their sophomore
This
project.
is the second one. Yeah.
This was their second one? What was their first?
The
Toho game.
Toho, the SMT, the SMT
Okay.
Toho game, which they did on console.
Gotcha. Well, you had an opportunity to get with Refint Games about the East versus Trails in the Sky project. So, what was their favorite coffee? And also, just like, what was your opportunity to speak with them about? Like, what were some enlightening, tidbits you got from that opportunity?
Yeah. So, this wasn't. I wasn't even sure whether this was going to happen, because what happened is when the game was coming out, like Refund Games, uh, there was a point where we weren't sure who to contact for codes and stuff, and then we got to know who was doing it, and I just got in touch with them back and forth because I was gonna do my usual like Steam Deck and Switch thing. And then they basically mentioned something about enhanced backward compatibility on Switch too, because Ease vs Trails in the Sky Alternative Saga released on PS5, PS4, PC, and it released on Nintendo Switch 1. But they did some enhanced backward compatibility stuff for Switch 2, where they actually, without a dev kit, which is important. So
Yep.
I was just curious about how they were going to handle this back and forth and stuff. And then, you know how it is with like anyone who's been playing games on Switch and Switch 2, specifically third party ports. This year has been like abysmal for patches. Everything is delayed to the point where like we brought this up with Inazuma 11 as well. Like when they released the Switch and Switch 2 version, saves weren't working, so they had to patch every other version of the game to enable it, because it would take too long to get the Switch patch approved for fixing saves. Like the approval process is just really long on that platform. So I was just curious how they were going to handle this. And when the Switch patch finally did show up for enhanced backward compatibility, it actually worked. They weren't like bullshitting. It's like 1080p handheld, looks really nice docked when I play it on my 1440 display, but it's still a Switch 1 game. So I was like, let me reach out to them and see, like, do you want to discuss this? Because usually when devs do things like this, they don't want to talk about it or whatever. And then they were up for the interview, so I was like, yeah, let's do a back and forth or whatever. And this is like a new tradition where every time there's a Falcom game getting released in the West, I have an interview up for it, except for the Gung Ho one, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, like that didn't end up working out. So yeah, with Ease versus Trails in the Sky, it was very interesting to find out how they approached the remaster, some of the challenges they ran into, because they actually tried doing above 60 FPS, but then it would cause online issues, and how they basically met up with PH3 Durante Studio when they were in Austria, and how they've been influenced by their work to put in the show BGM option on all platforms, so that when you're playing and a new song comes, you have this like notification on the top left which will tell you what song and what disc from the soundtrack it is in. So very interesting interview to just like figure out how they approach this, like what they learned from this project, the challenges, because they had to do cross-platform play and implement rollback netcode. It's a fighting game after all. And how they had, like, they said that it was hard implementing that because like all different platforms, consoles, back-end stuff, and how their next project will be a lot better because they've like shipped now on multiple platforms. So I think it's worth reading for any Falcom fan and just anyone who's curious to see how a PSP game gets remastered for like console and PC. So yeah, I was very happy to have done that. And the other thing which is kind of funny is, whenever I interview anyone who ports games and remasters stuff, I will always bring up games I want to see on modern platforms, even though 99% of the chance, like 99% of the time, they're going to say no comment or something like that. So when I brought up potentially Brandish the Dark Revenant, or even like, the original Trails in the Sky trilogy being remastered because we have remakes, uh, like Adrian from Refin said, we have no information to give about this at this moment, which is essentially no comment. But I've had some people say, why do you ask these questions if you're not going to get an answer? And I asked them to show that there is interest, and usually readers will see that and they'll also bring it up with the publisher or the developer. So that's why I bring up these things. Like, that's also why I asked for an Xbox version, because I think like James and I are like two of the only people who will always bring up Xbox stuff when we talk to
not
devs and
anymore.
publishers.
Not
Oh yeah,
anymore.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's
Yeah.
true. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I did bring up the brandish thing, brought up trails, and for
Yeah.
coffee, he said only a few of us drink coffee, and then he gave me some responses, which is like someone likes Starbucks, someone liked iced coffee, and someone likes flavored coffee. So
yeah. Full disclosure, I'm friends with Adrian. I got a dinner with him during Anime Expo, him and Nate at NIS America. So it's like actually some of the stuff he talked about with the Switch 2, that Switch 2 compatibility stuff that he didn't go over in the interview. He actually told me some of the nitty gritty stuff. And basically the way it worked internally is that running the same code on a Switch 1 versus a Switch 2, you can return like slightly different things if you're like even based off of like different versions of the Switch 1, like Switch 1 versus Switch OLED, you'll get slightly different, like you'll get a slightly different response depending on like the minute changes to the chip. And through that, they were able to figure out, okay, so if you're running code on a Switch 2, this is what you would expect. So if the game gets this returning when it boots, then it can know, oh, it's running on a Switch 2, and we can just change it to like output it at a different resolution, which is how they did it, which is really fascinating. But
yeah, that's really interesting that they could do that, because dev kits are obviously still an issue for smaller developers. So and he also brought up that the Toho game which they have is already 1080p when you play it on Switch too. So I'm glad they had that also sorted.
yeah.
So yeah, it's I still end up I really hope they end up doing brandish, because that's like the only Exceed Falcom thing which is still stuck on console with no sign of a PC port.
Yeah, I think any chance that they do that will depend on how well East versus Trails in the Sky has been doing. They are a small team, so I can't imagine it would have to do that much in order to justify it. But really, again, it depends. Like, I don't know how it's doing on console. It seems like it's doing okay on, well, it seems like it's doing all right on Steam for what it is. But again, we don't know for sure. So.
It's worth noting that it still has the physical release, which is supposed to be through limited run games, and usually these niche releases and small publishers end up like making a decent amount from those, because you end up selling at full price and stuff. So hopefully that does well for them, and hopefully it does get a normal physical release in Japan, so I can get that, because I'm not buying the limited run games release. So yeah.
For the next topic, Josh, you mentioned here on the sidebar Inazuma News. Is this separate from like the patch updates, or is this which
there's something going on, right, Mikhail? Because I know you have to leave soon, but I know you want to talk about the Inazuma stuff and obviously the interview that you did with
yeah. So like we brought it up a bit when you were talking about the story and stuff, like when I said that they've been doing a lot of patches and stuff. So what's happened, I think this is now thrice in a row where obviously, like, you know, our time zones are different. So I'm awake and I see, like, I get a notification for level 5 CEO posting something about the game on like Twitter, and then I'll see like, oh, this update is out now with like some new features or some bug fixes, and I'll just tag you and say, oh, look, here's another big update. And that happened once, and I was like, okay, everyone's going to be settling down for the holidays. But it happened again a few days later, and now it's happened again to the point where he said that next week there's a big update coming, and then there's also a major update coming on December 22nd, which adds the Galaxy route to Chronicle mode, and it adds unannounced features and content which they will talk about in the near future. So like, you've played more of the game than I have, because like I've not like touched much of Chronicle mode after doing my comparison articles. I'm still doing the story, but let me hear what you have to say about like their cadence with updates so far, because it's pretty insane for a game.
To contextualize this, since November 26th, which is what, like last week, since that there has been 1, 2, 5 patches for that game that it released. Some have been fixes, some have been like adding and fixing stuff, some have been like introducing new features, and then now like at the end of the month, it's like they're gonna add that like the Galaxy route has always been known since there's like an in-game calendar that you can like. There's sort of a daily login, but it's like retroactive. So let's say you buy the game now and you access that calendar, you still get all the rewards that like all the previous days of that game has been released. You'll retroactively gain all of them. So it's not like you have to be there day in day out to get them. But this advent calendar has always been like showing, hey, on December 22nd, we will add the Galaxy route, which is Inazuma 11 Galaxy to Chronicle mode, because Chronicle mode is like sort of like a recap mode showing all the significant like battle or soccer matches throughout every previous Inazuma 11 game, anime, whatever. So like the throughout this month and then up until like I think February or March of next year, they're gonna add in like 11, then Aries, then I forget what came after Aries. I think there's like 2 or 3 more Inazuma 11 like content drops for Chronicle mode after this Galaxy route is added, because that mode is technically not done because there's so much shit that they're putting in that obviously the later Inazuma 11 entries, when they started development on them, they had to work through a lot of other stuff because they were more recent. So, and of course, a lot of this Hino has been like addressing through social media on his own personal Twitter account. There was this whole contentious fix in the game where when they added an advanced win, which is basically if you score 4 goals and the enemy scores none in the first half, it'll automatically skip the second half, like in Chronicle mode and some other modes. Not story mode or any of that stuff, like the narratively important ones. But for ones that like you clearly overpower the enemy team, whether it's through levels or whatnot, it's just basically, hey, you get that win because we don't want you to sit through this TDM that I was talking about a few weeks back. When they implemented that change, there was some other change that was like was more so a bug fix in terms of like how managers and coordinators passives work, where there was like this whole meta game developing competitively of people stacking modifiers in the passives of managers and coordinators, and apparently that was a bug fix. So they reverted a lot of changes that people already made in that metagame, and that what had an explosive response for the community. So Hino and Level 5 was like, okay, we've had such like negative backlash on this change that was a bug fix that people exploited, that they're gonna, I don't know how exactly the specifics of how they're gonna revert it, but they're gonna make it so people can still continue to do that metagame stacking of coordinators and manager passives. But I don't know if there's like any sort of like limit restrictions of how they're going to handle it, so it's not out of control, because you get, if you do it well, you could pretty much have such an outrageous advantage based on like the config of your team. Because when you're making a soccer team in Inazuma 11, you can have like a rough play team, a counter team, a justice team, etc. And some passives work extremely and scale well off of like the configuration type of your soccer team, which gives you massive advantages in competitive play. And obviously they're going to run online tournaments for this game eventually. And so they want to keep that under control if they want this to be a competitively viable game. So it's a whole fucking crazy mess, and it's like once you get it, like once you dig in deep into like the whole Inazuma 11 community right now, there's a whole universe of like people of all varying types. Some are there for like the PvP competitiveness and the metagaming. Some are there for collecting all the scouts in the single player mode, which are very, very not. There's a whole like collecting process to them that you have to go through, and like fighting like your favorite ones. Some are there for obviously the whole team building aspect that has so many customizable ways you can do that. So there's a lot of different sub communities developing for Inazuma 11 Victory Road that like even bug fixes are already causing massive ripples in some sections of the sub communities of this game. That's been fascinating. to witness and being like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening. That's crazy. It's just a weird thing to like think about. Like, man, I'm such like an Inazuma 11 head for understanding this now.
I mean, like, yeah, this just reminds me. Every time they do one of these updates, I check the subreddit, and it's super duper active right now for like 3 or 4 like threads for every single update, and yeah, it's pretty crazy seeing so much interest. Like even the Steam charts for the game, like they obviously announced some sales figures before like 500K, but yeah, it still has like insane retention on Steam, and it is a very long game. Like I don't know when I'm gonna be able to beat it, but yeah, like that's my aim to at least finish the story this month for sure. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a good
Chronicle
close to
mode.
attention. Yeah, it's heartwarming to see, but it's very. I definitely feel for the developers over there at level 5. Hopefully, they have somewhat healthy life schedules still. I cannot imagine that the cadence of these updates is easy on them. Let's say it's hopefully they're okay over there. Because there's some one of the responses we got on your recent social media post for this update coming out. Someone mentioned, and I didn't even think about it, it's like when Hino posts these, it's usually like 2 a.m. Japan time when he posts about these on his personal Twitter. So I'm like thinking, it's like, does he just come back at like 1:55 a.m. at home and he's like, all right, time to fire up Twitter and make a post? Fuck. There was also before you leave, because I know it's getting late over there, Mikhail. But a new game was announced called The Godslayer. This was announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And this is this kind of came out of nowhere. I'm not sure where this came from. I saw like a trailer and a gameplay video from IGN, and I think the gameplay stuff was exclusive. And it looks like a new action RPG that's very. It looks sort of like Avatar: The Last Airbender in some aspects, where it's very melee focused, but you can mix and match different elements to your melee combos, and you were able to sit down with developers over at Pathea Games to talk about the Godslayer. Just kind of give us an insight of like a basic introduction about this game, who you spoke with, and sort of what did you guys discuss about it. This looks like an interesting project.
Yeah, so this was something Alex asked me if I was interested in doing it, and I was pretty surprised to see this from Pathea Games because they've done, like, I know them because of the My Time at Porsche and Sandrock games, which are like life simulation games inspired by Story of Seasons and stuff. And I played My Time at Porsche like a fuck ton on everything. I love that game. So when I saw this, I was like, yeah, sure, this looks interesting. So I got to talk to the creative director and founder of Pathea Games, and I saw a presentation showing some gameplay and like just what their philosophy was for this project. They wanted to they basically wanted two things. They wanted me to know two things from the get go: that this is a premium game, so it's not a free to play game, and it's not a Souls like. Because I think they just assume that when you see an action RPG from China at this point, you just assume it's going to be a Souls like. That was what they told me, that they didn't want this to be a Souls like. They wanted it to be, like you said, Avatar: The Last Airbender was a big inspiration for them for the combat, kung fu films, and stuff like that. Assassin's Creed in some ways, they have a very dense city for this game. The whole like story takes place in this one city. But what is, like you said, right? This game came out of nowhere, so I thought so as well. But apparently, when I was doing research for the interview, it was announced back in 2023. Like it was just revealed as a PlayStation China hero project from Pathea Games and Sony at that point. They had like some concept art or whatever, but it hadn't actually seen proper gameplay and stuff until now. So when I saw the game, yeah, it looked like there was a lot of interaction between the environment and how, like he mentioned, the elements you use in combat and stuff. All of that looked interesting. After I saw the presentation, so there's one thing I absolutely hate, like not related to this presentation specifically, but whenever there's a gameplay demo and you're supposed to like write a preview based on a hands-off thing, I absolutely despise that stuff until I don't like writing about things until I get to play it myself. So
Yeah, for
I didn't
sure.
bother doing a quote unquote preview for this. I just focused on the interview. So there was a short gameplay video which was, it was IGN exclusive for like a few hours. That's why my interview went up later in the day. Like I did the news post in the morning because I didn't want to have the interview which talks about the gameplay not actually have the gameplay video in it. So there was like a
Yeah,
separate
makes
embargo for
sense
that.
for
Yeah,
sure.
so the gameplay, it was like a combination of cutscenes like in engine and stuff like that. It looked like it had a lot of weight to it, and it basically I was impressed by what I saw. It's I think they're aiming for, it's still like a few years away, so gonna be a while before we play it. But there were a few things I was curious about. So because this was announced as a China, like PlayStation China hero project, I was like, you've said Xbox now. So is it like actually coming to Xbox, and is it still part of the project? And he confirmed it still is part of the project and that it's still coming to Xbox. I think that's notable because it shows that Sony's PlayStation Hero project also allows multi-plat stuff on console now. It's not like just PlayStation and PC, which is what most of the games have been so far at launch. So that was
Yeah.
interesting. The other thing is because it's multi-plat now. I was curious about Switch 2, and he said, yeah, they want to bring it there. They'll try their best, but it depends on the CPU thing because uh, like in the interview he was talking about how when they were programming the stuff they wanted to have so much interactivity where they wanted the player to be able to like just like form a hole in the ground and fill it with actual water, and then it could drown enemies and stuff. But there were so many things to keep in mind with the like programming for this that they wouldn't have been able to do it for all the target platforms. I assume that means specific consoles, because like if you're making a game for high end PC, it doesn't matter what happens with this stuff. But there was something like that they had to cut. And visually I don't know what to think about it. Like it looks really nice with the lighting and stuff, but I feel like some of the aspects, like some of the designs look a bit generic to me. But again, this is like super early, so I'm gonna see how it evolves when they show more about it.
Yeah, I think the potential of this game, when I saw the gameplay video, was really like they kept emphasizing like the interactivity of the environment, because some of the stuff that really impressed me is like when they were fighting against like a group of enemies, and when some of them could shoot fire at you, you could like use your like form a rock wall in front of you, like in real time, and then the fire will disperse on that when it collides with that rock wall, and then you summon like different water torrents to like surround the enemies and get them like in a whirlpool, and that's like all just happening like in front of you. So it's really like, and there's some parts of that gameplay video where like you're kind of throwing like environmental objects that are leaning on walls up again on enemies. So I really agree that like I think this game has potential, but it really will come down to like, hey, how much can you play around with the environment that you're given? It's sort of like almost the Red Faction Armageddon sort of design principle of like, hey, you can collapse all of these buildings. Like with this, it's like, okay, how destructible can I get? How much can I interact with the environment so it can intertwine into my gameplay in that respect. So, and you mentioned, I totally missed this, but this was like initially like, unveiled in 2023. And when it was initially unveiled in 2023, they were already saying this will be a 2027 project. We are aiming for this to be released in 2027, even though we are unveiling it in 2023. And that's just like something like you don't really see in this space, That's like, oh shit, okay, well, that's good luck on your project, I mean, that's crazy that you already have like a loose time frame that you're talking about here.
Yeah, and I found it a little funny that I think I was the only person. I don't know how many like outlets were able to interview them, but I think I was the only person who brought this up because he said that I was told by marketing not to mention a time frame or anything. But since you did see that original announcement, which we did make publicly, we're still aiming for that time frame. So, and he was laughing while saying that. So they are still aiming for that. At least that's what he told me. So we'll see when that actually does show up. But it's still like a few years away now. So
Yeah.
I need to see a proper like as with all these projects, I'd like to reserve my final judgment for like seeing unedited gameplay, because whatever they show
Yeah.
so far in engine and all looks nice and all, but I need to like see how it is on actual target hardware before I get excited for this. But there is potential.
I'm with you. Like, I'm not really a believer until like I get to like play the game for myself and see how it performs. Like, what, like the most you can only get so much out of like viewing something. The whole story unfolds in front of you when you actually interact with the game in front of you.
I mean, we saw this like firsthand when you were streaming Wu Chang Fallen Feathers pre-release, and I was watching your stream, and I was like, is it my internet which is dropping or no? Then you were like, no, the game is actually stuttering for me. And like when we saw pre-release footage of that, it never had any of these issues. So yeah, like it's one of those things where you need to see it on target hardware unedited before you can get excited for
Right.
the actual experience. But
This
yeah,
is
there is
Unreal Engine 5,
potential.
they said, right? I forgot what engine this is on. Was this on
I
Unreal
I
Engine
actually
5?
I actually forgot to ask them this specific topic in the end, because if I would have brought up the Unreal Engine 5 issues on current platform. This is one topic I just did not have enough time with towards the
Yeah,
end,
makes
because
sense. Yeah.
I had to prioritize the all important coffee question,
Yeah,
unfortunately. So
that makes sense. I agree
yeah,
with
so
that. I
and
would have gone with that
yeah.
question too before that.
Yeah, so then in the end, like when I asked about coffee, he said, I drink a lot of coffee. I like coffee because I can't survive without it. Yep, that's relatable. So
Shout outs
yeah.
to all the interviewers lately that have made developers and publishers aware that like, hey, there's this sort of like negative social stigma surrounding Unreal Engine 5 because people have seen so many recent cases in modern games where this performs poorly on their systems, even on high-end systems. And hopefully that makes them more aware that they should be prioritizing optimizations of these games before release and not after the fact. Like I remember there's one interview with Dynasty Warriors 3 Remastered where that game is being built on Unreal Engine 5, and they let them know. It was like a Chinese interview. It's like, hey, like please make sure to like optimize this game as much as you can like before release, because there's been a lot of recent release recently that like haven't performed poorly with that engine.
That
Just
that
making them
Dynasty
aware.
Warriors remake, that Dynasty Warriors remake is coming to Switch One. Also, it's going to be an Unreal Engine 5 game on Switch One.
Dude, that's gonna be fucking yeah. You're gonna have a
Scarlet
you're gonna have the time of your life with that the next year. That should be like your most
Pokemon
anticipated
Scarlet
like
Violet.
project next
Damn.
year.
Yeah.
What is going on, man? Godspeed. Hopefully your Switch doesn't like catch on fire and like explode instantly trying to run that game.
You know what scene I wish it would explode on? It would be like that guy summoning the boulder. It's like, you flaming idiots!
Oh no. But yeah, once again, thank you, Mikhail, for all the hard work you put in. And it was great having you for this episode. I know it's getting late over there, so I'll get some good shut eye.
And believe it or not, we still have a couple more shout outs, so these ones will be pretty quick. We did get another review up from Scott. This is one of his special interests. Demeo Cross Dungeons and Dragons Battlemarked. Adam, do I have this right? This is a VR game.
Yes.
Yeah. So like,
I was wondering about
Scott's
that because I was like, isn't Demeo that VR game that I haven't played? I I was like, wait a second.
So like apparently Scott tried the original Demeo Demeo game like at a PAX a few years back when VR was really coming on the scene. And then this is like a crossover with D&D, which of course many of us have different, levels of interaction and familiarity with. So like a fun crossover, but kind of niche because it's, do you know Demeo? Do you have the ability to play in VR? And how big of a fan are you of Dungeons and Dragons? Scott was able to go into that special interest and review Demeo Cross Dungeons and Dragons Battlemarked, which released near the end of November. So not a game that I can speak to literally at all, but Scott was able to put up some pretty lengthy impressions of the game up on RPG site. So I did want to at least give it a platform for like, VR has not taken the world by storm, but it is, Steam's obviously double downing on it with the frame, and it's still developers are still out there making games for the space. So we were able to get that coverage up on the site. So thank you, Scott, for that. I think we've covered all the article shout outs. We did mention the Atelier Resleriana review. Did we mention that?
I don't think we did, but we finally got one up.
We didn't.
Yep.
Yeah, so obviously Atelier Resleriana, the Red Alchemist, and the White Guardian was the second Atelier game to like release this year after Yumiya in March. Obviously set. I always get the details here like slightly wrong. Set in the same universe as the mobile game, but it is a separate story. Do I have that quite right? Like it is
I
standalone.
believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
But Nathan's primary takeaway was like, you should consider this a crossover game. Like this is an Atelier game for Atelier fans mostly because it's got a bunch of characters from other games. Like that's how you should approach it.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the screenshots in the review, and it's like, yeah, that sure is 3 Atelier main characters and one of the major recurring characters from the Dusk arc in that party. Yep.
Mhm.
I am curious about playing this eventually because I do know, especially over time, a lot of the Atelier fans that I know have been like, okay, we honestly like this game more than Yumiya, which I get because the further away I get from Yumiya, it's like it's an okay game, but it's not a great Atelier game.
Mm.
But yeah.
But we did get that. Like, not all of our reviews are timely. I know, having been on the scale of writing reviews months after they release. But I guess that one came out in September, so it's not too late. But we did get that up on the site. So our official Atelier, Resleriana, Red Alchemist, and White Guardian review is up on the site. Thank you to Nathan for publishing that up. So now we are finally in the news section. It's a slow news month, as December kind of always is, but there are a few headlines here. We did already talk about the announcement that Mikhail was already able to go into with the Godslayer from Pathia Games. We have a few other announcements from this week. This one, I forget like where this was shown, but I did not hear of it until I started looking at the podcast and actually going to rpgsite.net to get my dose of RPG news and being like announced a space samurai action RPG Sol Shogunate coming to PC with a reveal trailer from Chinese studio Chaos Manufacturing. The trailer looks like pretty early to me, but it's got like that stellar Stellar Blade cross Neo vibe. Only I don't even know if that's like doing it justice.
It's like
Like,
a funny like
uh,
crossover. Like you made that. Like I would have never guessed Stellar Blade cross Neo when you said that. I love it.
but uh,
But I get you. I feel you.
yeah, it's a third person action RPG of some sort. The trailer does show like gameplay, but I think it's more like mock gameplay. And I'm not saying that as like a judgment thing, just more of a descriptive thing. It's like cinematic gameplay for a reveal trailer in that sense. So in terms of like it does it reflect the actual pace of the game? I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it's got that. Also, it has a little bit of like that post-apocalyptic, futuristic, uh, nearish vibes. But it's a pretty short trailer, so I'm kind of extrapolating from like a few screenshots and a few minutes of footage.
Yeah,
But
they described it as a samurai space opera, which is a very interesting
yeah,
tagline for that game. It has like some visuals of like a horse riding a horse on the moon, and it's like that's crazy. Like it's definitely like you just said, like the sound design of the trailer is very Stellar Blade esque. There's some Neo, there's some Warframe in there as well when you think about its aesthetics.
mm,
But in terms of like gameplay, like you said, it seems early, and like there's some jankiness to that, but like not necessarily like in a bad way. I think of like in a way of the samurai way where it looks sort of jerky, but not that's not
mhm.
necessarily a bad thing in my opinion because the samurai games are they're very amusing even though they're not the most refined battle systems.
And just for context, this last week there was like the PC Gamer Most Wanted stream, and this was in that.
Oh,
And
okay,
Gotcha.
got it.
those streams always had like a good kind of mix of like kind of under the radar type of indie double A smaller scale. Usually sometimes like a lot of non-Japanese, non-American like devs just that's their outlet to show off their game, and here's one of them.
Yeah, very cool.
This next one is kind of wish Mikhail was still here. A crossover or like I don't know, crossover is not the right word, but an IP that I was never expecting to see covered on RPG site really in any way. So boomer shooters in the vein of like classic 90s shooters, but modern, have been made for like 10 years now. There's a lot in that space. And one of the first ones was Dusk by New Blood Games. I forget when Dusk released because I never played it and we never covered it because it was very much just like here's a first person shooter in the vein of what you remember from your childhood, from like Hexen and Doom days. Uh, New Blood Interactive has announced Dungeons of Dusk, which is a first person dungeon crawler based on the Dusk IP. Very like classic Blobber. Like if there's boomer shooter, this is boomer blobber. I don't know if that's that term's gonna
Boomer
work.
Blobber.
Blobber.
I love that.
But
Uh,
it's like I have not played very many single first person dungeon crawlers. I know Adam's played a handful of them, maybe more than a handful. But like I was actually like, Adam, are you interested in this? I know James as well has played plenty of these first person dungeon crawlers as well. But just not something I was ever expecting to see on RPG site to see Dusk reimagined, and I'm not sure if it's like a sequel or in the same vein or just the
It's kind
same.
of
Like I don't like.
It's set between the episodes.
yeah. So it's a
Ah,
canonical entry that's set in between the
there you
episodes
go.
of Dusk.
You play
So
half
hey,
of Dusk, and then you play this, and then you play the rest of Dusk. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So if
I'm
like if you want
loving
the full
the
Dusk story,
I'm loving the like the art design for the characters.
oh yeah, yeah. It shows a skill tree and ability tree in this, and it's it looks crazy. Like it's one of those things like you said, right? It's like wow, that's kind of an interesting way to present this kind of game in a way that you would never think. That's an interesting
Mhm.
genre crossover.
It really does look like a first person shooter, like a boomer shooter, only you're going like step by step because it's a dungeon crawler.
It seems like the developer like behind this specifically has worked on a bunch of dungeon RPGs and whatnot on Steam over the last like several years. Like
68K Studios as the
yeah,
listed as
yeah.
developer.
Their
Oh,
first
neat. Good
dungeon
call out.
RPG, which released in 2018, The Seventh Circle: Endless Nightmare, is currently $1 on Steam.
Before
Yeah.
that, in 2017, they released Karadash: The Lost Dungeons, and that's $3.99.
Yeah, and that's not a dungeon RPG. It's more of like a top-down, more like NetHack style, I guess.
Yeah.
But it looks like it might be. What's the trailer? Is it real time? Oh no,
I,
no! It's not real time. It is like tile based. It's just
yeah, it's like that taking turns of traversing. So
Yeah, it
things
looks
move
like you
when you
move, they
move.
move, like very
Yeah,
classic. Yeah.
very cool.
But yeah, announced for 2026 and basically releasing on everything, including like Switch and Switch 2 and mobile, PS and Xbox and PC. Like, there you go. This one I saw, and I was kind of like, huh, that's an interesting IP. So an IP that I don't to see revisited. In November, we had the release of the Sacred 2 remaster, which was kind of like one of those like late 2000s RPGs or like RPG action hybrids that I was interested in trying, but I've never gotten around to. And then I saw this announcement that this came during some other like game best showcase winter stream or something like that, like just another platform for smaller studios to get their titles shown or platformed. A new entry in the Sacred series that is uh according to their marketing in the style of a 16-bit RPG, so like Super Nintendo era or Genesis. Sacred Last Pixel of Ancaria, which I have a few thoughts on this. The fact that they put pixel in the title feels like very try hard. They're like I don't want to judge something too soon, but like, oh, they're really trying to hammer that this is a, in the vein of a 16-bit game by putting pixel in the title. And then also I saw a lot of excitement for this, like in the Gamatsu comments. But then I saw like what they showed of it, and it's like 20 seconds of one isomet like of just a very quick look at what the game might look like. Like very, very, very brief. Like it's more of an idea at this point. And not only that, but it's going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign in April. So this is very I don't like just getting its legs under it. Like it's going to have its crowdfunding campaign in 4 months.
Yeah, it's
We have
not.
seen
Yeah,
20
it's not,
seconds
not
worth.
coming out soon. Not coming out anytime soon for sure. And it's also weird that like they have established a Kickstarter page, but it's like it's gonna be in this state for 4.5 months. So it's 4.5 months out till this Kickstarter campaign to who knows what the state of the game that they have right now and what they're promising. But
Mhm.
it's also from the developers that recently did the Sacred 2 remaster, and from what I could tell, and from what I've heard from with friends who have who are much bigger Sacred 2 fans than I am, let's say, that whole remaster has been sort of a shit show. When it
That's what
came
I've heard,
out,
but I haven't. Yeah.
yeah. I think that there's been some patches here and there to try and rectify some of it, but from what I've heard, thus by many accounts, the state of that Secret 2 Fallen remaster or whatever, not great, not great. So
So might be a passion project by someone at that studio. Who knows? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm still rooting for it in that sense. Like, if you have the ability to work on a game and you want to work on a game and build it in this style, maybe it's something they can see some success with. But yeah, we'll revisit with that Kickstarter campaign in April to see how well that goes. Here's another one that was one that Mikhail and Josh made sure we put on the news list here because it was covered by Gamatsu and we're going to get it on RPG site up as soon as we can. An announcement of Queen's Domain for PC, and this is very much in like the first person N64 ish, like Kingsfield, or what was that game last year, Dread Delusion vein, where that style of first person RPG. And the trailer for it, like, it's weird because it looks like, in terms of performance, it looks good despite like the fact that it has a deliberate art style that it's going for that is like low poly, low texture. Like, it's a really neat art style. If you haven't seen the like what Dread Delusion looks like, or if you want to pull up the reveal trailer for Queen's Domain, it's really like evocative, and it's something I'm like, this is, I think, kind of up my alley, even though I've never really played like any
Yeah,
game
it's
of
like
this sort.
a mix of like Kingsfield and a little bit of Turok because of there's so many like
Yeah.
outside jungle environments.
It
Like
looks
it's
like
Mhm.
it looks like the type of game that like some Japanese developer would have made in the early 2000s if the Dreamcast hadn't died.
yeah, it's a good way to put it.
And of course, the name is like right on the nose, like King's Field, Queen's Domain,
Yeah,
sort of thing. Like,
10
gee, I
million
wonder what
percent.
inspired them. But
Yeah.
it looks really neat. Like, and
Yeah,
I
I'm down to
remember
play.
last year. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Games.
I'd be down to play this because I really enjoyed what I really enjoyed Lunacid. I also enjoyed
That was another good one. Yeah.
yeah, it's I'm glad this style of game is having a resurgence because
Mhm.
it's definitely I like to see more games like this, more RPGs like this.
And speaking of Turok, I'm just looking at the YouTube comments of the YouTube trailer. It's like Kingsfield, Turok, and Metroid Prime had a baby. Like, there you go. But yeah,
I also do
uh,
appreciate that it's not fully going for like the PS1 style graphics. Like there is still like a roughness to the visuals, but it feels very intentional, but they're also going for their own thing. So yeah, I'm super excited. The number one YouTube comment looks like some kind of Royal Plains, a monarch prairie of some kind. Can't put my finger on it.
yep. I Dread Delusion's also kind of like currently on my backlog, as I remember circling that on my calendar when we talked about it last year, and eventually there'll be time for it.
Okay, you still have the rest of your life to get to it. It won't go away anyway.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go. Yep.
going by the comments, it's like, oh fuck, I should probably play Labyrinth of the Demon King before the Game of the Year podcast. Fuck.
Yep. The next headline that we have here is one that maybe I'll let Josh speak to. It's more business dev, especially for like Japanese games, about font licensing. But this is something that Kite was able to very thoroughly cover for us on the site in terms of citing their sources, linking all of the relevant information for what this headline means. But Josh, can you like break it down for us?
Yeah, this is an interesting one that I put to Kite's attention, and he did a fantastic job breaking it down on its ramifications. So this is going to get a little bit weird, but I promise it'll make sense. So the headline is Fontworks lets LETS game font licensing cessation might affect Japanese game developer companies next year. So throughout the years, in many, many, many Japanese games, you have probably played. Everyone has played some of it. Like even Atlas for Persona 5, and Etrian Odyssey. Square Enix with Dragon Quest 11 and FF15, and some of the most popular mobile games on the planet, like Grand Blue Fantasy, Fate Grand Order. Use a certain like use fonts from a company called Fontworks, and they had a very very generously priced fee where they had an annual licensing fee of like I roughly like I think it was like $300 something, but I'm
Maybe
sure Kite look it
386,
up.
third
three hundred
paragraph.
eighty six
Yeah.
dollars per year, and for hey, you can use our fonts under this LETS license, to include this to include the typefaces in your video games. They were acquired by Monotype, a US-based company, back in September 2023, and they have rolled back this very generous annual license structure, and now their new pricing structure under their current how it exists now is they would have to pay a standard subscription fee of $20,500 per year, and if you do the conversion between the US dollar and the Japanese yen, it is roughly over 50 times more expensive now because of this acquisition and the change to the rules and the change of the pricing structure. And it's only the caveat under this new standard plan is that it's as Kai puts it, it's an aggregate of up to 25,000 registered users, which is a big problem for games like Grand Blue Fantasy and Fate Grand Order, which these fonts in those games serve way more than 25,000 users on those. And also on top of that, they have in their cases over 10 years worth of content that have used this font. So they would have to pay an astronomical fee to continue to use it under their pricing structure as we know it. We don't know exactly how they're going to tackle this issue next year, because if they were to switch to like a quote unquote free font, that would still cause major shakeups because they have very, very deliberate typesetting in them to allow their dialogue prompts to work as they should. It's not something that like you just go Control A on your whole entire game script and all the text font, choose to a different font, and then save. It's not that easy. That would break so many dialogue boxes and so many pages of the interview.
I'm not the only one who has to like write reports for like my day job, and like some of my reports have like graphics and images and whatnot, and like text boxes in certain spots, and like if you try changing like font or font size, it will mess up everything. And now try thinking of that in just like a 10-year-old mobile game with like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue, right? It's
Yeah,
a lot to go through.
Well, we even run that into like a small form, like when trying to just get press releases to show up properly on our website. Just sometimes like certain characters just aren't recognized because of the font typing.
Yeah, and this is also not accounting for like, hey, obviously the Japanese has a lot. It's a way more complex language than like the English alphabetical characters. They have kanas, kanji. They have and the way that they're displayed on and rendered on screens. It's not an easy process, and finding fonts that are legible for that format is not easy also. So it's a very interesting news story, and I honestly don't know. They must have like I feel like there has to be some legacy deal behind the scenes that has to be sorted out for things to continue if they were to continue running as is. Because if Monotype does not let them, get some sort of deal in, I don't know what these companies would have to do to adhere to it, because if they don't adhere to Monotype's rules, it would be illegal. And so what does that mean in the long run for these long running service games? Because they could no longer, every time you log to those games, you see the font that they're using. But if now that's illegal to serve to their users, what then? It's a very obviously I'm not the most knowledgeable on that stuff. Business dev wise, I don't know what would have to happen and how you would begin to even fix the situation to a point where it's like acceptable for Monotype to be okay with. But it's just like another classic case of like, hey, this US based company has acquired this other company and has, well, enshittified all of its practices and and has compromised their existing clients based on this acquisition. um I don't know. I don't know what's gonna be the fallout of this. Hopefully they'll reach a solution that will be okay with all parties. But if you start seeing radical UI changes on a lot of legacy Japanese games next year, and you see that their fonts look maybe a little different, maybe you'll see, maybe you'll begin to understand why that is happening. So, hoping for the best, because this is not an easy problem to solve. I imagine there's a lot of like massive fires behind the scenes that a lot of developers are working around the clock to find the solution on right now.
Yep, good breakdown. Thank you for that, Josh. And then yeah, Kite as well went into a lot of detail about here's what the Japanese and English web pages for monotype fonts says. Here's how it was originally reported in the Japanese media. Here are some many different game examples, like you said, Fate Grand Order, Grand Blue Fantasy, Monster Hunter Generations, uh, other like package titles like Final Fantasy 15, Dragon Quest 11 did. So like not it could affect not just Japanese mobile games. Like no, it could affect a lot of things out of Japan. So
Yes.
we'll have to see. Bigger studios might be able to absorb costs. Indie studios, I imagine, are going to be adversely affected at like a non-proportionate rate. That just can't put up $20,000 to use the same font they've been using for years. So hopefully a solution's found through here, or Monotype changes the pricing scheme, or some allowances are made. Yeah. Few other smaller headlines as we wrap out the podcast. We are approaching a update to Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail patch 7.4. As always, I'll kind of hand it off to James just to we have a trailer here. They have some sort of collaboration with Tom Morello, who is a character I'm not familiar with.
Oh, this
A person I'm not familiar with.
Tom Morello is lead guitarist for Rage Against the Machine.
I did not know this. I'm not a
Yes.
music person, but
Yeah.
so he's partnering just with their sound, like with Soken, with their sound team.
It's a little bit more interesting than that. Basically, what happened is that apparently him and James Charles Miller, who's like a vocalist on a bunch of 14 songs, and also was the vocalist for like a lot of the songs in Metal Gear Rising. Apparently, they play board games together, and when out of nowhere, James Charles Miller was talking about both the community and also the people at Square Enix that are huge fans. Well, they're a great community, and you also mentioned that Soken's a huge fan of Rage Against the Machine. So out of nowhere, Square Enix didn't reach out to him. He wrote a song and just sent it to them and said, "Use it. No questions asked, just use it."
Crazy story.
So yeah, there's a very real chance. Well, as someone that is a 14 raider and has very much enjoyed this expansion's raid series, if this last tier sticks to landing, this is easily going to be the best raid series in the entire game. It's really, really good, and everything they've shown so far of the new fights, it's like, oh man, this is gonna hit. The joke that people have been making about this raid series has been wrestling themed, like WWE or whatnot.
Okay.
And the way that 14 raids usually work is that you have tiers. Each tier is 4 fights, well, 4 or 5. But technically, the way it works is that if there is a 5th fight, it's like an extra phase that's in the final fight that's only for the Savage version, which is the hard mode version of the fight. The first tier, the 3rd fight was the Brute Bomber. The 2nd tier, the 3rd fight was the Brute Abomination. Same guy, but fucked up. He's dead now, but people have been making a joke where it's like, what if the 3rd fight of the final tier is the Brute Underbomber or whatever, because, Undertaker. And it seems like that might actually be the case. And there's a decent chance that the Tom Morello song might actually be the theme for that fight, in which case, pure cinema.
That's just the whole context of that whole situation, and like lining up with what this expansion has done really well. I don't know. It just seems like a very like serendipitous series of events.
Yeah, and this patch
That's
will
really
also
neat.
be directly leading into whatever it's going to start, like tying into whatever the next expansion is going to be about. So we'll have an idea, at least, of what the next expansion will be by the time this drops, because it makes sense, because FanFest is in spring, so it'll be before patch 7.5. So they're going to want to make sure that, well, it won't be before patch. It
We're due
depends.
for a new expansion next year, right?
Yes. That's the plan anyways, it sounds like. But yeah, so I'm excited for this. I am, as always, I'm going to be rating it. So apologies in advance for anyone that follows me on Blue Sky that has never seen me whenever a new raid tier in Final Fantasy 14 drops, because that is definitely an experience.
they're gonna announce the new expansion, and they're like, "Oh man, we have to the new expansion is gonna be so visually and CPU intensive that they're gonna ask they're gonna have a new minimum spec on RAM. You're gonna have to we're gonna be forced to upgrade your RAM if you're doing the minimum spec of RAM right now." It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. We need just a little bit more RAM out of you." That's okay, right? Everyone loves RAM, right?
Yep.
Oh,
Got
I'll
a
be fine.
mortgage for another stick. There you go.
Man, if I ever need to, if I ever have a rainy day, I can just sell the 64 gigabytes of my RAM and get a new car.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm so glad I got my computer upgraded in like 2023. Like
Yeah.
recent enough that I can hold on to my RAM for a good while longer. Yeah.
Yep.
Do we have a patch day for 7.4? I just want to make sure I at least say the date.
December 16th. The raids
Gotcha.
drop on January 6th, which thank God, because everyone before they said that they were going to delay the raids by 2 weeks. Well, no, 3 weeks actually. We're concerned because it's either they delay it for a week, in which case it's right on top of Christmas, or they delayed it by
I'm gonna
2
hold up
weeks,
in
in
my
which
room.
case it's
Got a
right on
raid.
top of New Year's. And no, they delayed it 3 weeks because it's like, because they said, like, and I quote, "We're sorry that we dropped Chaotic Cloud of Darkness on Christmas Eve last year," because that is a thing they certainly did.
There you go. Just a few more headlines. Code Vein is still getting its kind of like weekly look-ins for trailers ahead of its late January release for Code Vein 2. We got a new character trailer, Lyle McLeish, kind of like the azure blue-haired like swordsman. And then on RPG site, Kite also posted a Prologue trailer from the Japanese Bandai Namco account, which I guess kind of goes into like more of the characters in general and like their roles in your home base area. So, including hot springs, of course. But
Oh, I just looked up that Lyle character. I have a bunch of friends that are going to want to do things to this character design. Good
there you
lord.
go. For a sales update, this one I am both am and am not surprised by. Within a few days of the Elden Ring DLC, Forsaken Hollows releasing, it has shipped 2 million units. So Elden Ring Nightreign is still got a very fervent, player base, and its DLC that added like 3 bosses and 2 classes.
I I
It's
think the
already at
interest
2 million.
I think the interesting thing about this is twofold. One, I saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, the reason why Night Rain sold well was because of specifically because of the Elden Ring name," which sure, you could argue that, but you can't really say that anymore when the DLC instantly sold 2 million copies. People that picked it like Night Rain up just because of the Elden Ring name and didn't like it would not pick up the DLC. So this is proof that no, people really like Night Rain for what it is. Also, I think
I
this is a very good sign that the Dusk Bloods is probably going to be a major release for Nintendo next year. So,
Yeah. And then Mikhail does pull up one small bit of nuance just to call it out that there was also a new physical edition of Elden Ring, the deluxe edition that included Night Rain, And it's not clear whether this 2 million count includes those deluxe edition sales, but still kind of like the same idea. 2 million people coming in months after the fact to pick up Nightreign physically, either because they're excited for it or because they were waiting for that version. Just still doing very well under the Elden Ring name for
Yep.
From Software and Bandai Namco.
Man, every time I hear about like From Software's latest game immediately selling multiples of millions within a day, it's like it's just crazy to think that they're probably like top 5 biggest developers in the entire industry now. Insane.
I forget if it was Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3. But like when one of those hit like the 5 million sales mark, it was like this weird like, oh my god, how high can they climb? And then Elden Ring does like 20 million or whatever it did. It's like, oh,
It's 35 million, the most recent.
35. Really?
Yeah.
Just the numbers get so big that like I just can't contextualize it anymore. So a few just small date updates. The Yakuza Kiwami Steam updates are being pushed from December 8th to December 11th. No real reason was given for that, but just so you know. The Digimon Stories first, Time Stranger's first DLC, alternate dimension, is releasing on December 9th.
Yeah, this one's cool. They showed off a trailer for it for the release date, and it does confirm that a returning character from Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, Kyoko Kuremi, is going to be like one of the central main characters they're going to be focusing on for this episode pack. And it was kind of odd because she did a very, very small cameo appearance in the base game if you decided to get the Cyber Sleuth outfit DLC, because each DLC has like a very small mini quest that it's basically an excuse for you to like put on the outfit and then complete the quest. It has like very minimal rewards. But for that specific one, has like a very small stinger at the end where she had like a voice line. So she still got like a voice credit at the credits of that game, but it's like really weird. It's like wow, it's good that they credited Kyoko Kuremi's voice actresses both in English and Japanese in the credits, where it was like only 1 or 2 lines, and it was like on a locked behind a very small quest DLC thing. And
I'm like, very curious about what the small spoiler for Cyber Sleuth. Which version of her?
Yeah. It's
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So, like we already knew, like because one of the characters in Time Stranger also had the Kuremi surname. Obviously there was some link. So Hyoko and that character will be sort of like the focal main like characters for this first story episode DLC. Then there are some other Time Stranger characters that'll be the focus on the other DLCs. So, it'll be, for the third one, it'll be Monica and Asuna. And then the second one will be like the streamer friend that I'm forgetting the name of, the one with the glasses. So I'm definitely going to go back in a few days. Like I guess depending on time zone differences, it's either tomorrow night in Pacific or Monday. I don't know exactly when they're going to hit. But hey, I need to reinstall that game and check this out because I have the deluxe edition thing or ultimate edition thing or whatever. So I'll already have it with me. Also, another thing about this DLC that was pretty much confirmed if you are a Digimon head and you knew if there's alternate parallel dimensions being involved. A lot of people thought, hey, are they going to reintroduce Parallelmon? Because Parallelmon was like this Digimon that's been locked since like a very early Digimon game, like in the Dusk games, and like they have yet to reappear yet. And then they did confirm if you have any of the DLC, whether it's this episode pack 1 or episode pack 3 or any of those, you'll also have Parallelmon as a Digivolution option as long as you have any one of these DLCs with them on top of like the 5 Digimon that they're introducing per episode pack. So that's a cool thing. I'm it's like I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I'm very curious. I really like that game, and I like it enough to go back and check out these story DLCs, which is something I don't
I was
really
gonna say
do
that's
for
rare
many
for you.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really do for many games.
And the last headline is just that Mado Monogatari Fia and the Wondrous Academy is going to get a PC release next spring. So it's already available on Sony, PlayStation, and Switch. And that's it. That's the last headline of this year. So you'll hear from us next at some point in January for the regular episode. But like I said, at sometime like third week of December, we're gonna have the Game of the Year cast. Not gonna repeat what we just said at the beginning of the podcast, but in terms of next regular episode, probably not January 3rd. I will not be available. It does depend on availability, but I don't think I'll be back home by then for my holiday trip. But by sure on January 10th. I
I
think that's when we'll
probably
circle.
won't. I probably won't be on January 10th because I'll be in the 14 rating mines. But
There you go. But I think January 10th, I'm 90% sure that's when we'll do our first regular episode in 2026. Because the 3rd will just be that first weekend after New Year's Eve and day. So I think the 10th will work better. But you will hear from us in a Game of the Year cast before that point, between then and now. So that'll come out in middle of the month. So I was gonna like do all the thank yous for following us throughout the year, but that's gonna kind of come again at the Game of the Year cast. So it still remains true. People who follow this podcast, and so we've seen some people mention in our Discord channel, join us discord.gg/RPG site, that in their Spotify Wrapped, we were their number 1, 2, or 3 podcast. It's really cool to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Or people that leave comments and ratings. You know we know that's like a small but fervent audience that does follow us, because not everyone wants to listen to 3 hours plus of like RPG talk every week, but we're able to do it. So not only for the listeners, but participants, all of us here that are on the podcast, our regular contributors, or even our like occasional contributors that come up a few times a year. There's a lot of people that go into this, and a lot of talents that go into this, that and we even with all that, we don't get to everything, because there's just so much. But we appreciate all the support all the same. If you follow RPG site on any social media platform, or you visit our website, you bookmark it, or, you leave likes on the reviews, or you leave ratings on the podcast episodes, we like to see all that. And going back to the other topic, even if you disagree with the review, let us know. Like, obviously, courteously, of course, but we do like to see feedback in all sorts, in all sense, from anything that we put out there. So all the reviews or articles or interviews that we shout out on the podcast, we're hoping that you're finding those that you're interested in, and clicking them and reading through them, and leaving thoughts if you've got any. But
Yeah, and,
we
and also just
appreciate
a,
it both.
a reminder, like as Adam mentioned, you still have time. Go vote in those reader polls that Adam has put up. And as he said, there's some very, very close races. So you could be the difference. You could be the difference on who is the winner of those.
Yeah. So your favorite RPG of 2025, and your most anticipated for 2026. So thank you all, as always, so much for listening. Until you hear from us in the Game of the Year cast next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to you all next year.